What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto saves fairy tale from Acnologia? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. It is that time of the year already? The man voiced his thought out loud, as he saw a ship approaching the island from afar. You say it like it is a bad thing. He didn't need to turn around to know who said that, because she was someone he was too familiar with. It is, he muttered annoyingly under his breath, but the young lady could hear it very well. Taking an appearance of a girl in her 13 or 14, the young woman had very long, wavy, pastel yellow blonde hair that reached down to her feet with a single lock pointing upwards. Large green eyes with no pupils, peachy skin and a slight childlike build. She wore a frilly, pink layered robe with a red ribbon tied in a bow around her neck. Around the chest were 3 blue diamond patterns with 2 blue triangles above, which each series of these was outlined in a hot pink. She wore wing-like adornments around her ears and small hoop earrings. The ethereal body of Mavis Vermilion was only a feet behind him, standing barefoot on the hot sand and looked at the ship carrying the next generation of her pride guild with a warm smile on her face. It's been a year since the last time any of them was there, and while she was sure that there would be many unfamiliar faces, Mavis couldn't wait to see them. She was, after all, the founder and also first guild master of Fairy Tail. Don't you want to watch? She asked gently, but Mavis had already known the answer. No, was his short reply before the man stood up from his position on the beach of Tenro Island and disappeared into the forest without a sound. Mavis didn't try to follow him, not that she could. Smiling, she floated away, hiding herself from view when the first mage, a young man with pink hair, accompanied by a blue cat with white wings, and Exceed, arrived on Fairy Tail's holy ground. The annual Fairy Tail's S-Class promotion trial had been started, and to Mavis and secretly someone watching in the shadow, but she still knew so well, it's always been an interesting thing to see, especially the trial that took place 5 years ago. Unsurprisingly, the rule was just like the last time. For the first trial, the candidates and their partners were to choose one of 8 different paths, 4 of which were connected to another path, so the teams that meet have to fight against each other to continue. Meanwhile, 3 of them had the current Fairy Tail's S-Class mages in them, so in order to proceed further into the trial, the teams that meet them have to fight and win. In the end, there were only 5 out of 8 contestants that passed the first trial. Moving further into the promotion test was something new. The remaining participants were given 6 hours to locate and find her grave, or they would be disqualified. There are numerous obstacles that make this task difficult, such as fending off giant beasts that dwell in the forest. Finding the grave itself was also a great challenge, because first, the master didn't give any explicit hints or possible clues that could tell where it is, and second, it was a fake grave, to begin with. The purpose of this test was to challenge the intellect of the participants, unlike the first one, which was a challenge of strength and magic. You do know that he is here, right? Came a voice behind her, and Mavis could only nod her head. Her face didn't show any emotion, but he knew better. Talk about being at the right place at the right time. He said in amusement, leaning his head back against a tree trunk before closing his eyes, folding both hands behind his head. You're not going to do anything. It was not a question. No. Once again, he replied. They die? Not his problem. As she sat on a tree branch and watched the trial with keen eyes, Mavis was shocked to see how it had turned out. First, was the first meeting between 2 brothers, one destined to kill the other. It was a short reunion, but enough for the older one to know that his brother was nowhere near ready to fulfill his inner purpose yet. Then, was the arrival of Grimoire Heart Guild, one of the Dark Guild of the Balam Alliance, which was commonly considered the strongest dark guild in the world. Mavis was shocked, and horrified to see that the guild master, Hades, was none other than Precht Gaybalg, her old friend and also the second master, and one of the co-founders of Fairy Tail. Feeling his magical signature and, surprisingly, hearing his voice from more than a mile away, even the man who had his eyes rested for the entire time had to release a sigh and spoke up with his eyes still closed. I guess they really meant it when they say you rather die as a hero than live and see the day you become a monster. It was so true, and the man believed those words could even apply to himself, in some degrees. An all-out battle broke out between Fairy Tail and Grimoire Heart, with the latter's goal being none other than the legendary dark mage that was currently residing on the island. The third master of fairy tale, Makarov Drayar, threatened to cast fairy law, but Hades showed no fear and easily countered with his own version of the strongest spell of the three great fairy magics, Grimoire Law. Caught off guard by the true identity of the Dark Guild's guild master, Makarov shrunk down to his original size and was easily defeated by an energy blast, puncturing his body. "You're not going to help them?" Mavis had finally decided to ask when the battles all around the island reached their climaxes, with the favor belonged to the wizards of the Dark Guild. "No," he repeated, refusing to move an inch from his position. "But Naruto, in my perspective, they're doing just fine." The man, whose name Naruto, opened his right eye to look at her. "Plus, Tenro Tree is doing its job just fine. It better, because after all, it was him who made sure it would. Can you see they're trying to bring it down? Then I will grow it back when it's all over." Giving what Mavis would say an irresponsible respond, Naruto rolled his eyes before smirking at her. "And I thought you're the one who has the most faith in fairy tale." Mavis blushed and looked away. "You lot and that ridiculous power of friendship power-up of yours. Guess naivety is something that will never change in your guild." He mocked, ending their argument. When Kena Alberona arrived at her grave, Mavis bestowed her the second spell of three great fairy magics, Fairy Glitter, to save her friend. However, because she wasn't familiar with such a powerful spell, the attack was parried to the ground by a mage who was far superior to her. Fortunately for Kena, the ace of fairy tale, Gildart Clive, who was none other than her biological father, arrived and saved Kena and her friends. What came next was a battle that shook the entire island, and the strongest mage of fairy tale managed to come out with the win. There were victories that were lost, but in the end, when the reinforcements had finally arrived, Fairy Tail was able to push back the attacks and ensured the Great Tenro Tree, and in turn their own safety. But in an attempt to destroy Fairy Tail's unlimited source of power and their wills, using his magic, Great Tree Arc, Azuma was able to uproot the Tenro Tree from the ground. Upon doing so, all the Fairy Tail members started to lose their magic and are unable to move, allowing the Grimoire Heart mages to gain the upper hand. However, acknowledging his opponent's power, Azuma had left Urza Scarlet, Titania of Fairy Tail, unharmed to commence their battle. "She's losing," Mavis commented when the next armor broke and fell from her body. "And, you still refuse to help?" Mavis asked, almost in disbelief. "She was the sole reason Naruto was there on the island fire year ago. Can you at least grow the tree back?" "Like I said, I will grow it back when it's all over." His words clearly showed that he gave no concern for the battle's outcome. It made Mavis narrowed her eyes and pouted in response. "We both know who she is, so she will be fine. Trust me, she will win." His statement seemed obvious, as well as ridiculous enough, but Mavis gave no objection. Sure, against a mage at Azuma's caliber, Mavis was still worried for her safety, but she decided to trust him, knowing full well who the woman Naruto was talking about was. The battle continued for another 5 minutes, with the only motivations being Fairy Tail and her comrades being what kept her on her legs and sword in her hands. Urza fought with everything she had left, and true to Naruto's words, Urza struck Azuma and defeated him. Naruto laughed mockingly at Mavis, who in turn, smiled smugly because once again, a mage of her pride Fairy Tail had proven that their bond and friendship could overcome anything. Nevertheless, he was happy for her but felt a little sad in the end. Such negative feeling was something that appeared and disappeared in just only a split second. He used to it, and no longer paid too much of his mind to. The end of the battle was the most interesting to see, at least, in Naruto's opinion. A bunch of inexperienced brats defeated an old man with years of experience and immense magical power. They had help, a lot of help. The arrival of the third master's grandson, who was in a league of his own, the secret mission of the Exceeds, who destroyed an organic device called Devil's Heart, cutting Hades off his power source, and finally, the restoration of Tenro Tree by Ultir Milkovich, a mage of Grimoire Heart who suddenly after a conversation had a change of heart and decided to help them. But in the end, it was an impressive achievement for kids so young like them. "Where?" "He's on their ship." Naruto gave the answer even before Mavis could finish her question. "Maybe you should keep your eyes on him for a moment or two, instead of them all the time." He looked at the airship that was flying away from Tenro, but words were targeting the mages of Fairy Tail. "Are you sure that you have no care for them like you claim to?" Mavis asked teasingly, deciding that she had had enough of his blood comments. Hard to keep my eyes away when it all happened on my island. He pointed out, pressing his ownership of Tenryujima. Plus, it's funny to see them trying to act tough, and their power of friendship has always given me a good laugh. Naruto commented. They had to learn, sooner or later, that friendship wasn't going to help them overcome everything. As if Mavis could read his mind, she spoke up, surely you can teach them something different. Not gonna happen. He knew what she was trying to do, and he's not going to fall for it, not in a million year. Then you will consider it a million year later? No. Mavis giggled. She knew she got him there. Fortunately for him, that didn't last long, because when Grimoire Heart's airship disappeared from view, he could feel an immense magic power approaching the island from afar. Since she wasn't a normal ghost, Mavis' pale was noticeable, because she too could feel it. It's here. Mavis had her eyes widened in shock and horrification. She then turned to Naruto and bit her lower lip when she saw him giving no response, showing no concern. For once, Naruto, please don't just sit back and watch so heartlessly like that. Mavis spoke to him before floating away in a hurry. Looking up with keen blue eyes, Naruto could see it approaching. Unlike the ones who had noticed its presence, Naruto showed no emotion, no fear, no nervousness or whatsoever. The amusement he had when he was talking to Mavis had also disappeared, replaced with a blank expression that clearly showed that he didn't even care what was coming was, or what it was truly capable of. December 16, X 784. Fairy Tail were under the warm rays of the sun, when what could be their end inevitably came. It was going so well for them until Acnologia, the black dragon of Apocalypse, arrived. But instead of running away like normal people would, Fairy Tail charged at Acnologia. The youngest generation of Fairy Tail, against the Dragon King of Apocalypse, leading by Urza Scarlet. The other members of Fairy Tail returned to aid Natsu in his assault against the dragon, in order to protect their master, in order to protect their own, as a family. Bringing out everything that was left inside them, Fairy Tail team attacked Acnologia, bringing down wave after wave of magic on its gigantic body. You little. Makarov, the third master of Fairy Tail, said in bewilderment, completely shocked for what happened in front of his eyes. He had tried to fight Acnologia himself, to buy them some time to run away, but he was crushed by the powerful beast faster than he could even see it coming. In the moment he was about to face his end, they jumped in and attacked Acnologia with everything they had, doing the very thing that he, as a parent to them all, should be the one doing. I want you to know this, Ji-san. Laxus looked at his grandfather and grinned. I was against this, but do you really think that they're the kind of people who can run away and leave an old geezer behind? His grin got wilder as his hands sparked with electricity that could slay dragons. It's your guild, after all. You idiots. Tears swelled up at the corners of Makarov's eyes. He couldn't believe it and he didn't know what to say. He just sat there and watched on while sobbing quietly. In the middle of Fairy Guardian, a man stood up from his position and approached Tenro Tree, where he placed his hand on and closed his eyes. It all came down to this moment. R-O-O-A-R-R-R-R. The black dragon roared angrily and stomped its hands onto the ground, knocking the members of Fairy Tail away as if they were mere flies. The Dragon King spread its wings and took off to the sky before looking down at the island and opened its jaw, sucking in a mass amount of air strongly. Yuwa, Natsu cried, falling on top of Lucis' back. Is everyone alright? Urza asked loudly as she got up from the ground. None of our attacks is working at all, Elfman said through gritted teeth, his sister standing beside him, forced to deactivate her Satan soul form. This thing isn't using the strength it used when it fought me. Gildart thought as he gritted his teeth, looking up at Acnologia. It's just playing with them. It's a breath attack, Gajeel shouted when he saw energy began to swirl around Acnologia's mouth. Is it planning on blasting the whole island away? Kana asked in shock. No way. Seriously? Everyone who can use defensive magic, put the power you've got into it, now. Urza ordered, pointing back to her group. Right, Wendy nodded. There's not enough time to draw the seals. Fried muttered. There's plenty of defensive magic that does not require writing symbol or seals, Levi said hurriedly, sweats pouring down her forehead. By now anyone could feel the vast amount of magic Acnologia was emitting, even from here. Everyone, focus all your magical energy on Fried, Lisana shouted. Let's join hands together. Mira Jane Strauss said and offered her hands to the nearest person, her brother, as he took it. We can't let it end here. Natsu cried and grabbed Luce's hand. His other hand quickly took Urza's hands into his. Okay, we'll never give up, Lucy shouted, as tears flowing from her eyes. Everyone, join your power together as one. Gray also joined in, holding Juvia and Luce's hands as Fairy Tail stood in a circle. Laxus turned to his grandfather and offered him his hand, smiling softly to the tiny old man whose body was shaking, looking at his children in absolute shock. Then, gently he put his hand in Laxus' much bigger one. A smile made it to his face. We'll all go home together, he said. Fairy Tail stood in a circle as magical energy flared up around them. To Fairy Tail, they cried out all at once, looking up at Acnologia, who then unleashed his breath in a gigantic blast. Mavis looked at them, and couldn't stop herself from smiling, despite the sadness that was visible in her green eyes. The next generation of Fairy Tail fighting against the strongest dragon. Anyone who knew about the strength of the Dragon King could see that Fairy Tail was fighting in vain, as their attacks did almost no damages to the Black Dragon. The first master put her hands together and prayed. Their bonds and faiths in each other, they were something truly incredible. Mavis could feel it, and she knew that they would be more enough for the final spell of the three great fairy magics to be activated. Then suddenly, after she had successfully cast the spell, a hand was put on the top of her head. My island better not have a single scratch on it, got it? It happened so fast that when her eyes snapped open he had already disappeared, leaving behind a gentle whirlwind of leaves. The whole sky lifted up as the massive attack of Apocalypse approached them. The whole Tenro Island shook violently at the amount of magic released by the Black Dragon. Stay the fuck away from my island, was the last thing the members of Fairy Tail heard before the blinding light of Acnologia's breath attack blocked their fields of vision. Had they could see clearly, they would see a man with bright blonde hair shooting into the air with neck-breaking speed. Just in time, the entire island was completely wrapped in a glowing golden sphere. When he reached his maximum height, Naruto put his feet onto the top of the gigantic sphere, using it as a jumping platform to shoot even higher and faster into the air, toward Acnologia. However, the force of his jumping leap was so powerful that it created a shockwave that knocked everyone outside Fairy Sphere back upon impact. Though their eyes couldn't follow his movement, the protected island, however, had a different, much astonishing outcome to the people that were watching everything from afar in shock and awe. It was pushed backwards into the ocean, slamming into the bottom of the sea. Wrapping his right hand in golden energy, Naruto extended his arm forward with his palm open to block Acnologia's giant roar attack, disintegrating it into smaller beams that shot away in every direction around him. Cocking his other hand back and balling it into a fist, Naruto kept pushing forward until he was out of Acnologia's blast, aiming at the dragon's torso before delivering a devastating punch into its chest. His knuckle collided with Acnologia's scale, causing the black dragon to roar in pain. Naruto's fist nearly broke through his scale like a bullet through human skin, but fortunately for him, the shockwave created by the impact knocked him back with no hope to regain the control of its balance before Naruto could sink his fist into its flesh. Acnologia flew, but not with its wings. It tried to flap its wing, but Naruto wasn't that generous. He followed, somehow flying just as fast as he could run, and punched the dragon one more time, sending it higher into the air before falling down and crashing into the ground. Rolling onto the ground, leaving a long path of destruction behind, Acnologia was forced to change back to its human form. Taking the appearance of a rather muscular young man with dark skin, bearing the dark markings he does when he was a dragon, and long, dark blue-colored hair that wore a high-collared black coat and baggy pants bearing the same draconian markings, he rolled on the ground for a few times before standing up on his feet while growling angrily. In a split second, just as he was able to stand on his feet, Naruto appeared right in front of him in a flash of yellow. His body crouched low, holding his hand at his hip in a manner similar to a man holding a sword, and was about to slash it. Kanso. A large golden magic circle appeared in the palm of his hand, allowing a sword to manifest in his hand. Having his eyes widened, Acnologia tried to attack Naruto and stop him from doing whatever he was planning to do. However, every move he came up, every decision he made in his mind, was simply a second too late, or particularly wasn't enough against him. Faster than his eyes could follow, Naruto slashed his sword up, leaving behind a faint afterimage and of course, an extremely clean cut. Acnologia didn't even have the chance to acknowledge what Naruto had cut, because the man suddenly threw his sword into the air and shot his hand out to grab the Dragon Slayer's forehead and slammed him down to the ground, with force strong enough to crack skull in and create a huge crater on the ground. It was at that moment Acnologia realized his left arm had been severed from his body. Blood had started to flow out from his wound from his right shoulder. The pain had finally arrived, and despite that, he managed to say a single word when he had finally had a good look at the man and felt his blood turn cold. Standing at the height of 6'3" and having a lean yet muscular build, with bright spiky blonde hair, bright azure blue eyes that seemingly glowed with pure raw power, he dressed in a high-collared, white jacket with dark blue arm warmers, worn outside of a dark-colored shirt and long, black pants and matching colored sandals. His most noticeable feature, however, was the faint whisker-like marks on both sides of his cheeks, similar to that of a fox. It was him, Acnologia thought in horror, the same man who completely destroyed him 400 years ago when he was foolish enough to challenge him. But what shocked him the most was his appearance. It didn't change in the slightest. He hadn't aged a single day since their last encounter nearly 400 years ago. Naruto gave no reply. Instead, he reached his other hand out and caught the sword at the moment it was within arm reach. Twisting the sword around in his palm, Naruto then gripped the handle tightly and stabbed it down Acnologia's upper arm, tearing through the dark blue-haired man's flesh and impaling deeply into the ground. Acnologia grunted in pain but tried his best to keep it to himself, refusing to show a weakness to the man whose powers surpassed common senses. He finally said with a smirk, "Now, if I were you, I would stay exactly where you are. I aimed for the flesh only, so with a proper treatment and a decent amount of time, you can keep that arm. About the other, well." Naruto removed his hand from the Dragon Slayer's forehead and mockingly dusted the dirt, as well as blood, from the right area of his cloak, near to his bleeding shoulder. "Can't say the same." "Why what were you doing there?" He growled in hatred, but wisely kept his body still. He didn't show it with his words, but with the dangerous glints in his eyes, which were promising him that, "Move a muscle, and you will lose more than just your right arm. Don't you know? The island you just attacked, Tenro, is my island." Naruto answered. "Unlike Dragnov, I created it, built it and made it my home. You don't go into someone's house unless you are going to pick a fight." His expression darkened. "I don't tolerate disrespect, so consider yourself lucky you didn't lose your other arm or your head." If Mavis were there, she would probably tease him for not doing anything when Grimoire Heart attacked Tenro Island, but because he could fix the damages Grimoire Heart left behind and easily rebuild it when it was all over. Acnologia's attack, however, would completely annihilate the entire island. While he could recreate an entire island, making an exact replica of the island, Tenro was a land with an origin very special to him, and Naruto refused to have anything, let alone create something to replace its existence. So remember this to your heart. Stay the fuck away from my island. Naruto flicked his forehead and stood up. Turning around, he walked away and clicked his fingers the moment he passed Acnologia's severed arm. "You won't need this. I mean, you're still pretty much the most dangerous threat to the people of this world with just one arm." His arm caught fire, blue fire, and burned to ash right in front of his eyes. Leaving Acnologia behind, Naruto walked to the shore of the land, looking at the place where Tenro was. With Fairy Sphere activated, Mavis had ensured his homeland's safety, because nothing, not even time, could make any more damage to it. There was no way he could return to Tenro with Fairy Sphere still intact. He didn't know how long the sphere was going to last, but he understood it was going to be damn long if the casters had so much faith and trusts in each other. And unfortunately enough, from what he could see, Fairy Tail was full of them. What to do? Naruto muttered as he put his hand on his hip and looked around. Last of his era, Naruto Uzumaki was an immortal, after all. He had all the time in the world to decide, after all. Did you hear? On the newspapers? Not just the newspapers, everyone is talking about it. Half of Fairy Tail's mages disappeared in a single afternoon, including the current master and all of its S-class mage. Yeah, I heard some rumors they were traveling to their personal island located somewhere far from the country. It has completely disappeared with them as well. Do you think they're dead? I don't know, the other guilds seem to think otherwise. Blue Pegasus and Lamia Scale are out there helping the remaining members of Fairy Tail, but I don't think they will have much luck. Seriously, what could possibly defeat a guild as strong as they are and bring down an entire island with them? Also, what would become of Fairy Tail now? There were two things Naruto liked about bars. They had always been great sources for information, as well as a perfect place to hear people's truthful thoughts about some certain events that happened all around the world. A few cups, drunk, and then nothing come out of your mouth was a lie, spoken from the depth of your heart. It had been 3 days since the fall of Tenro Island, and from what he could see, the magic users of the world of magic and the civilians didn't take the news too well, which was completely understandable because they were kind of a big deal, being the strongest and #1 guild of Fury, after all. Though, Naruto didn't pay those words and opinions any mind because he knew better, and simply didn't care. It was him who had hidden Tenro from the world to begin with. Using not just magical barriers but also his more traditional sealing techniques, Naruto was able to make his home island impossible to find no matter what magic or technique was used, blocking it from watchful eyes of mankind. Even now, deep underneath the ocean, the barriers were still doing its job, shielding Tenro and Fairy Sphere from the ones who were searching for Fairy Tail. There's no way they could find it anytime soon, but he would love to see them trying to. He had been generous enough to allow Mavis to use Tenro as the holy ground of her Pride Guild. There's no way he's going to let her or anyone else have more than that. Gulping down the last of his cup, Naruto stood up, paid for his drinks and turned around to leave the bar. The town he was currently staying in, which located in the far east of Fury, was a quiet and peaceful one, something he had always preferred over something boisterous. Though, he would never stay at one place for more than a few months, so he wouldn't attract unnecessary attention. "Give me your money, fool." Without even looking at the thug, Naruto raised his arm and elbowed him in the face, sending him flying across the street before crashing through the window of a local store. His friends, fellow thugs, looked at Naruto with wide eyes and parted away in fear, making a path for him to walk through. With a sigh, Naruto made his way out of the town and disappeared into the forest. It should be noted that he was walking aimlessly because he hadn't decided where he should head to next. 10,000 years had passed and yet nothing had changed. One should always expect anything and everything at the same time, and even without having to go through and experience it all himself in the past, he knew this to be true. After all, his life had been screwing with him for as long as he could remember, over and over. He had to admit that while it was indeed awesome, it was fucked up at the same time. People hated him then adored him, some secretly loved him, and others saw him as an orange-loving idiot who would stop at nothing to have a dozen bowls of ramen every meal. Which was what used to be, but that wasn't the point. Either way, he didn't expect his life to turn upside down that fast. From angry people with bloodthirsty eyes hunting him down out of rage and maybe just for the fun of it, to an asshole who shoved a hand through his chest, and later hoped to take control of the entire world and kill him for the sake of his pessimistic view of peace. Unfortunately, said asshole happened to be the one person he would call his brother in nothing blood. His life had finally become worse when a war started over him. The Jubi was revived and so was Madara Uchiha, who later received the fastest transgender surgery in the history by a black glob with a face and turned into a woman, who quite frankly, freaked him out with her abnormal affection for her offspring. One should always expect anything and everything at the same time, but he didn't expect to become immortal. That one really shocked him, because he honestly wasn't expecting that one to happen out of everything else. Imagine his face when he woke up one morning and had everyone told him exactly what was happening. He took it as hard, as anyone who could no longer die could have. He drowned himself in self-pity, in the sadness of the thought of seeing his loved ones slowly dying around him while he would be the only one get left behind. It didn't take him less than a few centuries to pick himself together and decided that if he couldn't die he might as well make it worth. He watched a generation that filled with miracles, but also blood and hatred slowly die out after a long life and then witnessed the birth of the new one through the ashes of the previous era. It was a generation that only knew peace. Under his watch, it never knew what war was, or how much pain and suffering it could cause and bring. But much like the cycle of hatred, something he had hoped to put a stop to but realized it would never end as long as mankind was the same, it repeated. A new era raised and a new one took its place. Over and over again, the cycle continued and didn't seem to have a stop. Soon enough, he became tired of being a god to his people, Tired of watching the ones he came to love and cared about all leaving him behind like anyone before did and after them would. And tired of trying to do what he did best, a hero, and in return received nothing but pain and suffering. So with a heavy heart, he left his home and started to wander the lands as it changed, shifted and altered over time. Time went by far faster than he had expected, and before he realized it, he had been forgotten. Even his homeland had been reduced to the size of an island by the ocean, the very same island that was now called Tenro. Elemental nations had changed, and while it was only known by the historians who dug the deepest into the ancient times, it had completely forgotten by others. The world's now called Earthland, and along with its name, the knowledge of chakra and shinobi arts had also disappeared. Once feared by civilians, magic had risen and become an everyday phenomenon. Even Naruto, who spent nearly 1,000 years to master every art of shinobi, couldn't stop himself from testing himself in the arts of magic. When he first learned how to use magic, he was like a child in the candy store, because of the magical elements of them gave him the thrill unlike any other. It was an interesting way for Naruto to spend his endless time, but nonetheless, it reminded him of the old days, the time when he was taught his first ninja's techniques by his teachers. Traveling by foot for another 10 minutes, Naruto suddenly came to a stop and decided to speak up loud and clear after a moment of silence. "You know I can feel your presence from a mile away, so you don't have to call out to let me know you're here." After that, he turned around and looked at the young man who walked out from behind a tree. Having arrived in a dark magic portal just a few feet behind Naruto, the young man was about to call to get his attention, but obvious enough, it wasn't necessary. "Naruto. Zareth." Naruto nodded his head, saying that in acknowledgement, "Can't say I'm not surprised to see you here." The man who was standing before him was none other than Zareth, the strongest dark mage in the history of magic. Despite being a wizard who was famous for his extremely powerful and dangerous magic for more than 4 centuries, Zareth had the appearance of a young man, with black hair and dark eyes. Because much like Naruto, Zareth was an immortal, but his immortality came from the contradictory curse of Onxarim, which forced him to live forever, and kill anything he desires. It had proven the fact that immortality was nothing but a curse. When Naruto first met Zareth, he was quite shocked to know that Zareth was an immortal like him, and having gone through everything, he had to admit he felt bad for the guy because, in some way, the contradictory curse made Zareth's life worse than his. However, at least Zareth was killable, so he could still find some peace in the end. Zareth had already planned his death out and created a book from it, literally. "It's been a while, Naruto," the dark mage said, lowering his head just a little with a small smile on his lips. "It's hard to find you these days, but I see that you're still doing very well." "Not as well as you are, but thank you." Naruto rolled his eyes, his voice full of sarcasm. "How's it going for you? You got kidnapped the last time I saw you, if I recall correctly." "It's nothing important." Zareth shook his head. The smile nearly disappeared from his face as he approached Naruto. "What important is what came and happened afterwards." "You mean Acnologia?" It wasn't a question. Now that Zareth had mentioned the guy, Naruto couldn't help but wonder what the so-called Black Dragon of Apocalypse was doing, as well as feeling, at the moment. Acnologia had his pride hurt, his oversized ego crushed, for the second time, and right arm lost. They're 3 of the worst things that could happen to a prideful man in a single day. After all, he had it coming for trying to destroy my home. Naruto said with a bored expression before adding with a smirk, "But I didn't kill him, so you and that little country of yours pretty much still have something to worry about. But the bright side is that the Empire still has the original purpose of its existence. It'd be better if you just finished that thing for good." Zareth frowned but then shook his head with a smile. "But I have to admit that it was quite a display of strength back there. It's been a while since I last saw you using that much power in a battle, and it still amazed me like the first time. I'm just a guy trying to protect his home, nothing special." Naruto humbly mocked, extending his arms out and bowing his head in a dramatic manner. Battle? He wouldn't call it one. A battle was something where both opponents had chances of winning, regardless of how small they were. He could crush Acnologia without breaking a sweat, not that he could into something like that. So why should he acknowledge it as a battle, when the favor was clearly his and his alone? "Still, thank you." Naruto raised an eyebrow at Zareth's words of gratitude, for protecting Natsu. "I didn't save him, Zareth, it was Mavis." The immortal shinobi pointed out, Fairy sphere manifested even before Acnologia's attack could travel halfway to Tenro, so it's Mavis who you should give your gratitude to. Zarif said nothing in response. His face didn't show any emotion. But Naruto could feel a slight shift in his feelings when he mentioned Mavis. Anyway, I saw your little reunion with the brat. Didn't turn out like you had hoped it would, did it? It didn't, Zarif admitted while shaking his head sadly. Natsu is still not yet ready. I could hardly feel anything when he punched me. When he returns, do you think you can? I have said it before and I'll say it once again, Zarif, so you won't get too hope up this time as well. Naruto turned his head around to look at the dark mage, stating emotionlessly, I won't train your brother, find someone else to do that. Plus, it's extremely troublesome to train brats like him. It's for you and him to decide who is going to die first. The black-haired immortal sighed and looked down. Do you think that Natsu can kill me in the near future? Doubt it. Naruto rolled his eyes, but then added nonetheless, but maybe. Nothing could happen, after all. One should always expect anything and everything at the same time. I hope so. The legendary dark mage nodded, smiling gently at the thought. It took a few seconds, but he finally decided to ask, what are you going to do now, Naruto, now that Tenro is gone for the time being? I don't know, I think I will stick around here for a while. I don't know how long Fairy Sphere is going to last, but I don't think it's going to disappear in a year or two. He then glanced to Zarif, only for a second before looking away and saying with a grin, with his hands in his pocket, but I think I know where I should be next. Zarif nodded his head in understanding. It's actually a surprise for me to see you walking around without her following just a step behind. The dark mage commented, I hope everything is still alright between the two of you. Don't worry, everything is perfectly fine. It's just that I want her to spend some years experiencing the life with her own kind, not just with me. Naruto said, she listens, carries out every word and order I say without a second thought, but from me, she won't be able to learn anything. Staying with me, Sayla would be the same demonic servant you programmed her to be, and I don't want that. I see, I really should have asked your opinions before creating her, shouldn't I? Don't worry, in a way, I like her personality. It's just that she should loosen up a little bit, and start having more respect for herself like I have always had for her. Then I shouldn't waste any more of your time. Zarif smiled, it's time for me to take my leave. Come to her, Naruto. You don't have to tell me. The immortal shinobi grinned. Do you know where she is right now? Shouldn't be too hard to find her. He shrugged in response. She joined Tartarus, didn't she? I could track them down, but it's actually not necessary. One more thing, what about? But Zarif had never gotten the chance to finish that question because Naruto had given the answer without thinking. She seems fine on her own. Blankly, he said before walking away with his hands in his pockets, leaving Zarif behind wondering if he should tell the woman in question about his encounter with Naruto, and what he said about her. A few months period, Oracion Cease had been taken down by the Alliance Fairy Tail, Blue Pegasus and Lamia Scale. After their ultimate defeat, the guild had been dissolved and all members were being imprisoned by the Magic Council. In X784, Grimoire Heart was the strongest guild in existence, with the illusion goal of reawakening Zarif, someone who had never needed to be awakening to begin with the hope of creating the ultimate magic world, which led them to Tenro where they found Fairy Tail's S-class mage promotion trial to be taking place. An all-out war broke out between the two guilds, which Fairy Tail ultimately won, though not unscratched. The majority of its force was taken down by the wizards of Fairy Tail. While two of its core members decided to abandon the guild, the rest were killed by the dark mage they worshipped, Zarif, putting an end to the dark guild that reigned terror all over Fury. However, the falls of two of Oracion Cease and Grimoire Heart didn't put an end to the alliance between three most powerful dark guilds between three of the most powerful dark guilds in Fury. Tartarus was the name of the last guild of the Balam Alliance. Because it had always hidden behind the dark guilds under their control, preferring to run the underworld from the dark, its very existence had always been a big mystery to the people of Fury, so no one would have imagined the guild being comprised mostly of Aetherius, an extremely powerful race of demons born from the books of Zarif. Being one of these Aetherius demons, Sayla was a member of Tartarus and its core team, Kukimon, 9 Demon Gates. Taking the appearance of a woman, with exceptionally large ass and most noticeable feature being the two large gold-looking horns protruding from the sides of her head and pointing upwards, Ryujetsuden, goddess of the chill moon. Sayla was an extremely voluptuous demoness with unrivaled beauty, recognized by her fellow Aetherius as the most beautiful demon among them. Upon her head was a white band that separated the front of her hair, framing her bangs from her hair below the band. For clothing, Sayla wore a very revealing beige-colored leopard-printed kimono, bearing the black markings on her shoulders. The kimono was wrapped around her torso with a thick, decorative yellow ribbon that was tied behind her back, and her outfit was complemented by thigh-high socks that revealed her heels and toes, a white-colored strap that tied around her neck, where a necklace with a crystal gem that hung just above her cleavage was also worn. Sitting in a comfortable armchair by the window of the main hall of Tartarus Guild building with her leg crossed over the other, Sayla ignored the attention she was receiving from the lesser demons and kept her mind solely on the book she was reading. Despite being the youngest Aetherius, Zereth's last creation, Sayla's was by no means a weak demon. Her power was recognized by many, and it became the reason she was able to earn her position among the strongest, Kyukimon. But it wasn't her beauty or her clever mind, or her power which was a form of curse that allows her to fully control the body of her victims and manipulate them as if she was giving orders that made her special, unique and distinct from others. While all other Aetherius possessed an inborn drive to kill the Creator, established at the genetic level, which was the reason they were created and expressed consciously as a feeling to return to his side, Sayla was created with the sole purpose of serving her master with the best of her ability, and an instinct to put his needs and wishes at the top of her priority. Unconsciously, Sayla removed her hand from the page of her book and reached for the beautiful necklace she wore around her neck. It was a gift from her master, something she treasured just as much as she treasured his affectionate attention for her. Sayla was worried, as she had always been for the last 19 years since the last time she saw him. She knew better than doubting his ability to take care of himself, but there was not a single day she could stop thinking about him, wondering what he was doing and asking herself if he was happy without her at his side. Serving him, Naruto Uzumaki, was something she took great pride in, so imagine her feelings when he suddenly decided to send her away to live with her fellow demons for a few years after over 300 years of service. She was shocked and horrified when she heard it. She had thought she had done something wrong, or something that had seriously offended him, and on her knees, she had tried to beg for forgiveness. It came as a relief to Sayla when he told her she didn't do anything wrong and spent the next few minutes comforting her with gentle words. He wanted her to experience a life with her kind, and while Sayla had insisted that there was no need for such, he refused to change his decision. It was the only time she didn't want to listen to his words, which came out more of a request than an order. However, she was still extremely worried, no longer for her but for him. The morning after, she left him and went on a journey to find the other Aetherius demons, who had been gathered by a demon called Mard Gear of Tartarus under the will of End, the strongest Aetherius demon. Much to her surprise, before she left her master had given her his necklace as a promise to be the one who would come looking for her in the near future. His necklace, and his promise, they had finally set her heart at peace, allowing her to go on her own way without worrying about him having no more use for her. It didn't take her long to find Tartarus, as their activities were very strong at the time. From that point, she had become the guild's active member, and proved herself more than one time that she's a valuable asset to their goals. But what was bothering him? She had to wonder because at the time, he seemed distracted. He usually spaced out for no reason, and sometimes asked her stay behind to go somewhere else alone. It worried her and she had tried to ask him about it, but he changed the topic and started admiring the weathers faster than he could move. Thinking it as a personal matter, Sayla willingly stopped bothering him with her curiosity, but she wasn't able to stop worrying every time he returned and just went straight to sleep. Maybe it was the real reason he had decided to send her away, not just because he wanted her to spend a few years with her fellow Aetherius. She wasn't stupid, and had spent enough time with her master to know if he was up to something. In a way, it could be said that she understood him better than he understood himself. Gently playing with the crystal with the tip of her fingers, Sayla exhaled longingly and leant back against her armchair, turning her head to the side to look out the window. Maybe he would come to her today, maybe he would tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. Either way, she would still happily return to side once again and accompany him for the rest of eternity, as his loyal and faithful servant. You seem to be deep in thought, thinking about your master again? Deep in thought, Sayla didn't realize a demon was standing only a foot in front of her until they had spoken up. Returning her attention back to the front, Sayla had her eyes widened for a second before she quickly stood up from her seat to greet them with a slight but respectful bow of her head. Kyoka-sama. Kyoka had a very distinct appearance, most notably due to her half-human, half-aviary characteristics. She seemed to be of average height and weight, yet possessed a really large chest and a curvaceous hourglass figure. Covering her form was a skin-tight suit that further emphasized her chest, revealing her thighs and partially exposing her buttocks. Her shoulders and arms were concealed by a long, striped jacket with flaring sleeves, a four-way split tailback and a tall and gaping collar that completely covered Kyoka's neck. Kyoka's hands, however, took the form of sharp and scaly talons, whilst a thick pair of bands wrap around her thighs, stopping where a similar set of bird-like feet begin. She finished her outfit with an intricate helmet with a large gem on her forehead, which covered almost the entirety of her face save for her eyes and mouth. There were two long wing-like pieces of hair protrude from the sides, curving out around her face. The rest of her hair fell to her lower back, being wrapped tightly into a thick band. Like Sayla, she was an Aetherius of the Dark Guild Tartarus and a member of the 9 Demon Gates, as well as its leader. Among the members of the Kyukimon and their guild masters, Kyoka was the one she admired and respected the most, being one of the only demons that had greater power than hers, and the one who vouched for her when she appeared at Tartarus' doorstep when the rest doubted her for the differences between their innate desires. "You're reading?" The green-haired demoness smiled as she looked at the book in Sayla's hand. "Yes, Kyoka-sama, I found this book rather interesting," Sayla answered with a nod of her head. "Is there anything you need?" "You haven't answered my question." Kyoka leant her body forward and looked at Sayla in the eyes. A mischievous smile crossed her lips. "Were you thinking about your master again?" The black-haired demon blushed and with a soft smile, she nodded her head. I should have known." The goddess of the slave planet rolled her eyes. "You sure he still remembers you?" "It's been 19 years, hasn't it?" Sayla sighed mentally. "There she goes again. Master is busy. He is going to require my assistance once again as soon as he's done." Every time the two of them started a conversation about her master, she would bring that topic up, as if she thought Sayla's devotion for her master would change. It was rather obvious that Kyoka was infatuated with her, and was jealous of her sole affection for her master. Other than respect and admiration, Sayla had no special feeling for Kyoka, but for the last 19 years, Sayla had ended up in the superior demon's bedroom and engaged behaviors with her countless times, more than she could remember. It's a demon's thing, so she really couldn't help it. She had a very similar relationship with her master, though her times with him were strangely much more enjoyable. So did she feel ashamed for letting someone else, a woman but still someone else, touch her inappropriately like that? No, she didn't. It's not like there was anything special in their relationship. She had learned from books that men were rather possessive of the women they were in love with, but while he had shown a great amount of affection for her, it's not like he's in love with her or anything. In addition, while she cared very much for him and loved the attention he had for her, she had never viewed herself as his lover. She was his servant, and he was her master, nothing more, nothing less. But suddenly, Sayla frowned and became troubled. "There's nothing wrong about that, right? Right? Saying that, but still you have doubt, huh?" Kyoka smirked. Even though she noticed her frown and troubled look, she had mistaken them for something else. "Is there anything you need, Kyoka-sama?" The goddess of the chill moon quickly changed the topic, feeling the unnecessary to continue the current one with someone like Kyoka. "Yes, I need you to carry out this mission for me." Kyoka answered, "As you have already known, Grimoire Heart has been demolished by Fairy Tail." Sayla nodded her head in understanding. The news about the fall of Grimoire Heart was all over humans' newspapers, and while she could never bring herself to read one of them because they were so boring, she had heard some lesser demons gossiped about it. It was quite a surprise, but not shocking. "Well, we need to make sure that the dark guilds under their control remember where they belong. I will need you to go through every single one of them to make sure that they know their place. If they try to do anything suspicious, you know what to do." Sayla nodded her head seriously. "I will go to my room to prepare and will leave as soon as possible," she said, bowing her head to the green-haired demon. "Good." Kyoka smiled. "Remember that I expect nothing but success from you, Sayla." After saying goodbye to Kyoka, Sayla quickly made her way back to her room. She had a mission and she intended to carry it out with the best of her ability. Opening the door, Sayla walked into her room and closed it behind her. It was at that moment Sayla felt a presence behind her, and without the need to think, she turned around and thrust her palm forward. "Hey, Say." "Whoa," the person said in surprise and quickly dodged his head to the side, causing her hand to pass his head harmlessly and hit the wall behind him instead. That part of the wall was completely destroyed, and the force of her attack made the room rock slightly. "You're that angry?" he asked teasingly as her eyes widened in shock. "Master," she exclaimed in happiness, but then horrification when she realized she had tried to crush his head, not that she could, and immediately got down to her knees and lowered her head so low that her head touched the floor. "I'm so sorry for trying to attack you. Please forgive me. It's all right. It's my fault to begin with," Naruto said as he kneeled down and put his hand on her shoulder to lift her up. "Please raise your head, there's no need for you to bow." "Master, you're here," she said, looking at him for a second before throwing herself at him, wrapping her arms tightly around his shoulder. "I have missed you so much," she said with happiness. "It's been so long." Grinning, he hugged her back, returning her heartfelt welcome. "I've missed you too, Sayla," he said as he leant his head against hers, taking in the alluring scent that he loved and missed so much. "I'm so sorry for making you wait this long," he said, gently stroking her hair before pulling her close to capture her lips in a searing kiss. Of course, it wasn't their first time he had kissed her, but it surprised her every single time. It made her heart flutter, and soon, Sayla found herself kissing him back with just as much passion. After a minute, Naruto pulled back and smiled at her. Sayla was just as beautiful as he remembered her to be. "How have you been?" "I've been doing well, Master." Sayla smiled. "I did what you ordered me to do. I found the other ethereous demons and came to live with them," she said, before asking, "How did you find me, Master?" "With this necklace." His hand reached out and touched the gem of her necklace. "It's a special gem that responds to my chakra, so I can feel it even if you are halfway across the world. I have also added special seal into it, making it a marker for technique. You wear it, and I can find you no matter where you are and come to you in an instant." "Master," she smiled softly, her cheeks dusted pink. "You have changed, Sayla." Naruto smiled as he eyed her with keen eyes. But then, he frowned. "I owe you an apology, Sayla? I really shouldn't send you away against your will like that. It's just, please don't say that, Master." Sayla interrupted and put her hand on his cheek. "You have your reason, and I respect that, just as much as I respect you." Naruto sighed but smiled at her nonetheless. "Are you free right now?" he asked, and Sayla uncomfortably shook her head. "What's it?" "Tartarus wants me to go to the dark guilds that were under Grimoire Heart's control to remind them that we're still here." Naruto nodded in understanding. "Grimoire Heart, I know what happened to them. I was there and watched it." Naruto shrugged, causing Sayla to widen her eyes in surprise. "To tell you the truth, I care very little about it. Anyway, dark guilds, huh? Do you mind if I tag along?" "You don't." "I don't have to because I want to." Naruto grinned. "We have a lot to catch up to, and I'm dying to hear your stories with Tartarus, so why wasting any more time?" "Well, if you insist." It's just like what he said. They had a lot to catch up to. Standing with his back lean against the tree, Naruto crossed his arms on his chest and watched the burning building before him slowly crumbling down to the ground. The door was then blasted apart, and Sayla came walking out of the guild building of Dark Unicorn with a calm and hard expression on her face. But it didn't last long and immediately softened when she saw him standing outside, waiting for her. "Did I make you wait, Master?" Sayla asked as she stood in front of him, sounding apologetic. "Nah, don't worry, it's fine." Naruto shook his head and then noticed a small bloodstain on Sayla's left cheek, probably from one of the dark mages she killed at close range. "Hold on." With a small smile on his face, Naruto reached his hand out and gently cupped her cheek, keeping her head still so he could wipe the bloodstain away from her face with the sleeve of his jacket. "I guess the negotiation didn't turn out too well, did it?" As Sayla blushed at his affectionate attention, her immortal master turned his eyes to look at the burning building and saw it collapsed completely. "Those humans didn't quite agree with the ways we're running the underworld. Plus, they looked down on me and tried to touch me. It's a complete waste of time, so I ended their stories." Sayla looked at him and answered truthfully, causing the blonde to chuckle humorously. "Dark Unicorn is a weak guild anyway, so even if they accept my offer, I don't think they will have much use for Tartarus," she said distastefully, but then realized Naruto was no longer wiping her cheek, but still holding her face in his hand. "Master?" she asked in confusion, looking directly at him in the eyes. She saw love in them, the same love he had always had for her ever since she came to his side. "You're very beautiful, you know that?" His question surprised her. It was just a few simple words meant to praise her facial appearance, which had always been described by him and everyone as breathtaking, but of all the words he could tell her, they were the least of her expectations. It wasn't the first time he had said those words to her, and she wasn't expecting it to be the last. But for the first time ever, she felt the weight and the depth of his words, the real reason why he had always said them with so much love and affection. The Aetherius, for the past 19 years, they had given praises to her beauty for more than she could remember. Among them, she had the least facial appearance of a demon, which being the horns on her head. It made her look more like the human, the race she had come to hate with a passion, but the demons didn't seem to care, and so did she. Kyoka, of course, had complimented Sayla multi-times. She was the only one besides her master had seen more of the goddess of Chill Moon than just her face, and the generous amount of appeals that her clothes could barely keep from attention. However, now that she thought about it, she couldn't help but notice the difference between her master's compliments and the Aetherius, especially Kyoka's compliments on her beauty, as well as how she felt about them. Though she had never shown it, Sayla allowed herself to be easily by their compliments, for she had a lot of pride in her appearance. Other than that, she felt nothing. She was beautiful, possibly the most beautiful female Aetherius, so it's natural for them to find her beautiful, and why? Even humans, the human she had taken great pleasure in killing, couldn't keep their disgusting eyes off her. But when it came to her master, it was a whole different story. By no means was she the only one he had given those words to. Having accompanied him for more than 3 centuries, she had watched him falling in love with many women, as he had a tendency for falling for women that he spent a lot of time around with, and saying the same words to them for more than either of them could remember, but strangely he had always made her feel more special than any of them. Why? She didn't understand. Her heart warmed up every time he did that. It brought a smile to her face without reason, making her feel butterflies in her stomach. Butterflies in her stomach? Sayla almost sniggered at herself for using a strange human's definition. She had read about it in one of their boring books, and she had never truly understood the definition until now. Was it because she was in love with him, her master? The romantic novels she had read over the years had given her the answer, but she didn't trust any of them. She didn't like any of them to begin with, but she had always forced herself to read them for 2 reasons, with the first being the limitation of the demon's library, as most of the books of demons had been made into Aetherius, and the second being her master, so she could understand him more, as he was once human. She had so many feelings for her master. Respect, admiration, obeisance, but she didn't even know if love was one of them or could have the honor to call herself his lover. She didn't know if it was possible for an Aetherius like her to develop something outside of how they were programmed, but whenever she was around him, she felt giddy and extremely happy. Sayla had always kept her demeanor in a calm mask, but whenever she was talking to him, she felt that mask slipping, and she started acting not that much different from a female human who was crazily in love with someone. Love had always been a strange definition for Sayla. 300 years she accompanied him around the world, yet she had never thought about it. They were close, but was love a feeling that they could share mutually? Master cared for her deeply, but was it his love for her? Or was it something else? Was it how he had always treated his servants? He was a god to an entire era, so she wouldn't feel surprised if she wasn't his first servant or the first of his long list of servants that had the honor to keep his bed warm with her body. Particularly immortal, it's the only thing that made her more special and different from them. She must admit that she really didn't care if he was in love with her or not, but if she was truly in love with him, then so be it, but it still wouldn't make any difference to her position as his servant, right? Right? For the second time of the day, she doubted herself. She almost sniggered at that. The cold and calculating Ryujetsuten was being confused by her own feelings. It was something one couldn't see every day. Back to the real world, deep in her thought, Sayla didn't realize the two of them had been staring at each other for a while. But the next second when she blinked, she felt his lips on her, kissing her softly. Sayla was rather surprised, but she kissed him back nonetheless. Wrapping her arms around his neck and parting her lips, She closed her eyes and let him deepen the kiss to his liking, moaning softly when his tongue explored her mouth yet again. Her hands tangled in his hair, and she felt his hands slip down to her hips to bring her closer. They stayed like that for a while. Even after Naruto had stopped, Sayla continued, so Naruto had no other choice but tag along with her for more. He didn't mind all that much, because he had always enjoyed the feeling of her lips on his, especially when she put so much effort into the kiss. Then suddenly, while still kissing him, Sayla removed her hands from the back of his head and moved them down to his pants. Before he could do anything, Sayla had already unbuckled his pants. She was about to remove the rest after pulling down his zipper, but Naruto chose to stop her from doing whatever she was planning to do by grabbing her shoulders to push her back, but not too hard so she wouldn't misunderstand his intention. Whoa, keep it down right there, girl," Naruto said as he looked at Sayla, who had her eyes widened when she finally realized what she had tried to do. "Master, I'm so..." Of course, she would try to apologize and panic. He had expected just as much from his beautiful demoness, who had always tried to apologize to him every time she thought she had done him something wrong. No, it's alright, I don't mind. It's not like I don't want to do it with you or anything, but now is not the time for it." He then raised his hand and pointed toward the completely destroyed building before them. "Plus, we're also in not the right place. You just killed a bunch of people, whose corpses were only a few feet away from us. Killing a lot of your enemies and then having right there on or beside their corpses would only make us look like a couple of psychos, you know." He was immortal, and he had been many things, but a psycho was definitely not one of them. Though, Naruto must admit that he had lost his sanity once or twice in the past because of the harsh life of an immortal. Zipping up his zipper and fastened the belt around his waist, Naruto looked at Sayla and saw the troubled expression on her face. Smiling, Naruto leant forward and kissed her again, much to her surprise. "Don't just stand there." Taking a step back, Naruto grabbed her hand and walked away, pulling her with him. "Let's just get your mission for Tartarus over with so we can go somewhere more private. I promise you won't be wearing any of your clothes by the time we get there." He winked playfully, causing Sayla to blush. "If that is what you wish, master." Sayla nodded her head, finally returning the smile to her face. "So Sayla, tell me about Tartarus," Naruto asked as they traveled through the forest. "Did they treat you right? Were you able to make any friend there?" "Yes, master, they treated me very nice," Sayla answered truthfully, "though I wouldn't call any of them my friend. While we're friendly to each other, the concept of friend doesn't apply to us." Naruto nodded his head in understanding. Fair enough, he guessed. The lesser demons respect me for my strength, and I also have some respect for those who are stronger than me. The Kyukimon are the only ones I normally communicate with, so I don't know much about the others. Not that she cared about any of them. "Tell me more about them then." "Well, Jackal-sama is a boisterous demon with a lot of pride in his curse, so I don't really enjoy his company. Much like Franmath-sama, who can get very excited and impatient, and Easel, because he has very little respect to me as well as no dignity. Tempester-sama and Keys-sama are both quiet type, while Torifuzar-sama is the most serious of the 9, so I really enjoy working with him. Silver is a new member of our team, but I enjoy his company the most. We usually sit down and have nice conversations with each other. He is also a great listener, so I usually tell him stories of my traveling with you." "Well, the guy seems nice, might as well try to find an opportunity to meet him one day." Naruto nodded before asking, "Well, that's 7 of them, what about the last one?" "Kyoka-sama is the leader of the 9 demon gates, and she is the one who has been the nicest to me, and the one I have the most respect to." Sayla smiled. "She vouched for me when I arrived at Tartarus' doorstep. Since we have different objectives, the other Aetherius didn't have much trust for me back then. I am very grateful for what she has done for me, so I have tried to repay her as much as I can." "Repay, how?" Naruto asked in interest. "I fulfill every task she asks me to do, and..." She stopped, unable to bring herself to say it. It's nothing important, master," she answered, unable to bring herself to look at him when he looked at her. She had never thought too serious about it before because she believed that he wouldn't care, as it was nothing serious. Now, she thought otherwise. She was afraid how he was going to react to her answer. "What's wrong with her today? Answer me, Sayla." Naruto pressed on while crossing his arms on his chest. "It's an order." Sayla gulped nervously. I have with her whenever she asks Mato. She said it very fast but was nowhere near fast enough. Naruto blinked once, then he blinked twice. He heard it very clearly, but decided to ask nonetheless, "Excuse me? What's that again?" Gulping, Sayla steeled her nerve and answered, "I have with her whenever she asks me to." "I'm so sorry, master," she added quickly, lowering her head in shame. "So, you have with her?" Naruto inquired. "A lot of times in the past 19 years? "Yes. Feel good?" Kyoka-sama's curse can be used to heighten the sense of pleasure, so. She immediately slapped her hands over her mouth in horror. She looked up, and saw her master smirking darkly at her with his eyes half lifted. Master," she stuttered nervously. "Why are you so nervous, Sayla?" Naruto asked with a bright smile, too bright for her liking. "You shouldn't worry too much about it, I'm not angry at you or anything." He leant forward and looked at her in the eyes. Their faces were only an inch from each other. "Kyoka is the one who should be worrying about her life, because I'm going to kill her for touching you inappropriately." Sayla gasped in horror, but then he continued, "Oh wait, I'm going to make you kill her because watching it is going to give me so much fun." Was it possible? Because Kyoka was a stronger Aetherius than Sayla? Big deal, he could make her 10 or hundreds of times stronger than the strongest Aetherius, and, with his chakra, let alone a mere demon like the Kyoka. Sayla tried to open her mouth to talk, but when she saw the ground underneath him and around them breaking and the wind starting to pick up uncontrollably under the pressure of a fragment of his power, she knew he was angry and there's nothing she could say to change his mind. She didn't want Kyoka to die, not because the two of them had shared some intimate moments in her bedroom, but because she was a fellow Aetherius. Human, they slaughtered each other for their own gains, but nearly every single Aetherius demon shared the same objective, the same dream, something that they wanted to archive together, and for that, they had a mutual respect for each other. Even though Sayla was created for a different purpose, she knew how it felt like to be driven by inner desire. She understood their devotions for their goals, so she didn't want any of them to die before they could fulfill it. However, if it was her master's order, and he rarely gave her order, then she would fulfill it without question, and with the very best of her ability. Then so be it. Sayla lowered her head, stating calmly, "I will carry out your order this instant, master." She turned around and was about to walk away when suddenly Naruto shot his hand and grabbed her wrist, stopping her from advancing any further. "Relax, I was just kidding." Naruto chuckled, causing Sayla to drop her jaw in shock. "I won't kill her, or make you kill her." Her expression immediately brightened up. "Really, master? Other than the fact that you were doing it behind my back, which I don't like one bit." Her smile dropped. "I don't mind it that much. Maybe it's because Kyoka is also a woman, and I'm kind of into that girl-on-girl thing, you see, but maybe because it's something I truly, really deserve, for taking my eyes off you for more than a second." "Master, you," but he raised his hand and stopped her from saying anything more. "I really shouldn't send you away, but then again, it's not like I have any other choice." Naruto muttered the last part to himself, so Sayla wasn't able to hear it. "So, having with her really felt that good, huh?" he asked, giving her a teasing smile that caused her to blush. "Think you can introduce me to her? A threesome, maybe, master? Ah, I know you love that idea." Naruto grinned, putting both his hands on her cheeks. He could feel her blush very clearly. Who could have thought that his usual calm and cold servant could blush like a teenager girl like that? "Please stop teasing me, master." Ah, so she could make a request as well. It seemed his decision had turned out better than he thought it would. Still, she needed a reminder, and he knew exactly the way to remind her. "Sayla." He suddenly moved her head and turned her eyes to the front, making sure that she was looking straight at him in the eyes. "Do you know what I want to do next?" "Unfortunately no, master." Sayla shook her head. Smirking, Naruto leant forward and whispered into her ears. The Aetherius immediately blushed beet red. Master, it is." The demon stuttered nervously. Her face felt so hot that she just knew it had turned a brilliant shade of crimson and glowed almost visibly, even in the middle of daylight. She could also feel her strong and fast heartbeat, accelerated by the dirty thoughts that went through her mind. However, she was no less excited. "So you really like it, huh?" Naruto asked. His smirk became sly and widened. "So what do you say? Screw your mission and allow your master remind you of his awesomeness that none enhancement magic can hope to compare? If that is what you—" But Sayla had never had the chance to finish her respond. It all happened so fast she actually felt a little dizzy. She was grabbed by her master, while at the same time their surroundings changed faster than a blink. Next, her clothes were torn to shreds by his hands and squealed when she was tossed onto a decent-sized bed. She turned around, and he was already on top of her. Their lips crashed together before her hands were forced above her head. With only one hand, he kept her wrists together and let his free hand travel over her bare front, feeling her smooth skin and the incredible softness of her firm and heavy chest. When her master whispered into her ear, he had promised her two things: intense pleasure and incredible soreness by the time they were done and thorough. She knew better than anyone that Naruto Uzumaki would always keep his promise, no matter what. One thing for sure, at the end, she wouldn't be able to think of anyone or anything but him. It's something she was truly looking forward to. Time skipped 7 years later. 7 years had passed since the day Tenryujima, Tenro Island, wrapped protectively inside one of the three great fairy magic fairy sphere disappeared completely from the surface of Earthland, bringing the top strongest mages of Fairy Tail down to the deepest part of the sea with it. Fairy Tail, from the strongest guild of Fury, had become the lowest, weakest mage guild in Fury. Without its former income, the guild fell into near bankruptcy and could no longer afford to keep their building, which was forced into foreclosure soon after. After they left it, the remaining members of Fairy Tail moved into a small tavern at the edge of the town and made it their base of operations. 7 years, huh? Wakaba, a member of Fairy Tail, wondered his thought out loud as he blew out smoke from his cigar. It's really hard for me to believe that it's been that long. The good old days, Max said as he sighed longingly. That really takes me back. Nothing has been the same since then, Warren stated tearfully as he looked at the pictures that fell to the ground after the new guild in town, Twilight Ogre, had come and wrecked the place. After learning the horrible news, the remaining members of Fairy Tail had tried to search for their family with everything they had, but not a single one of them was found. All different kinds of organizations had joined together in the search, but none of their efforts had also resulted in anything. The Magic Council had let them know that it was Acnologia who had eradicated the entire island. It had shocked them to the core and taken all hopes from them because they all knew the story of the legendary dragon, which destroyed an entire continent on its own. It was just that there was no human alive would be able to take on that dragon. Suddenly, while they were still in the middle of their tearful moment, they all heard a loud rumbling sound coming from above them. What's that? Droid questioned in confusion. Is Ogre coming again? Jet asked, growling in frustration. Hurriedly, the mages ran outside of the guild hall and looked up, only to have their eyes widened when they saw Blue Pegasus Guild's magic airship, Christina, floating above them. Before any of them could say anything, a voice cried out from the ship, which for some reason, getting louder and louder by the second, men. Suddenly an object crashed into the ground with frightening impact, shocking the members of Fairy Tail. Looking back at the small crater that appeared once the dust had finally settled, everyone's eyes widened in shock when they saw it was the infamous Ichiya from Blue Pegasus lying on his side in the crater. Just for you, Fairy Tail, he said, pointing towards them. Appearing to be unaffected by the fall, I'm Ichiya. We understand how you feel, Ichiya-sama, but won't you settle down a bit? Another voice came from above. We could have floated down with my wind magic, you know, Ichiya-san. An irritated voice said. It's been a while, everyone. A third voice could be heard next, this one softer than the previous three. The three men landed on the ground gracefully, revealing themselves to be Blue Pegasus' famous Triman, Hibiki, Ren, and Eve. Why is Blue Pegasus here? Jet asked in total confusion, but ignoring his question, the Triman gathered around Lackey, currently the only female fairy mage at the guild, and started flirting with her. You are as beautiful as ever, Lackey-san, Hibiki said as he stroked the lavender-headed girl's hair. Those glasses, it really suits you, Ren said with a small blush, adding another compliment. Oh, thank you, she said nervously, unable to find any better response. Could you guys quit flirting and tell us why you're here? Max cried loudly. Stop that right now, men. Ichiya stepped in after rising to his feet. Please excuse us, the Triman said in unison as they bowed their heads at Lackey. Please forgive us. Why are you even here? Warren asked. We've done it, Ichiya said, dusting himself off and walking out of the crater. Something matching Christina's movement characteristics that we've recorded in the information archives has been detected in Fiore's Aeternano reading. Hibiki began with a small smile. Which means that, Ichiya said emphatically as he pointed his hands forward, Tenro Island still exists. All of Fairy Tail's members could only stand there in shock at the news, while several miles away, a certain immortal blonde woke up from his sleep when he felt a something he had been too familiar with. It's time, huh? Naruto said as he removed himself from the woman sleeping next to him and stood up from his bed. Moving toward the window, the blonde grabbed the curtain and gently moved them to the sides just a little, so it would give him just enough room to look at the world outside but not wide enough to allow the sunlight to slip in and ruin his lover's sleep. 7 years. It had been 7 years since the day he kicked Tenro into the ocean. He would never admit it or say it out loud, but he had to give Mavis and her brats some credit, because of the amount of magical power that was covered. Their bonds and faiths in each other was simply outstanding. Even he couldn't have done it any better. Master, what's wrong? A smile made its way to his face when he turned his head around and saw Sayla sitting on their bed with the cover only hid her body from the waist down, leaving the entire of her upper body to his view. Did I wake you up? Naruto asked when the beautiful demon yawned sleepily and rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand. He had always enjoyed a good sleep, but unlike her and human, he didn't need to sleep all that much, so even after having with her all night till 7 in the morning, he felt completely fine. No, master. Sayla shook her head and stood up from the bed as well. Letting the cover fall off her body, she made her way toward him before wrapping her hands around his torso and pressed her body against his. Because he was much taller than her head could only rest against his chest. Is something bothering you, master? It's not anything like that. Naruto shook his head and wrapped his arms around her when she moved her head back slightly to look at him. Can you stay here for a while? There's something I need to do. Yes, master. Sayla smiled, nodding her head. But please return as soon as you can. I would be very lonely without you. Is that a demand? It's a request, master. Sayla giggled and at the same time, Naruto laughed softly before lowering his head down to kiss her softly on the lips. Letting go of her, Naruto turned around and picked up his clothes, which had been scattered all around the room by Sayla the night before. Putting them on, Naruto turned to look at Sayla and saw her doing the same to herself, putting on her black kimono. The previous kimono had been destroyed by him 7 years ago, but the current one was no less revealing, and placing the bandana on the top of her head to move the bands of her face away from her face. Make breakfast if you can, this shouldn't take too long, Naruto said as he put on his jacket and disappeared in a flash of light. Sayla stared at the spot he was just standing a moment ago with a troubled expression. Did he forget that she didn't know how to cook? With a smile on her face, Mavis Vermilion outstretched her arms to the sides and allowed the holy land of Fairy Tail, Tenryujima, wrapped inside the glowing golden fairy sphere, re-emerged from the bottom of the ocean, shocking everyone who was watching from a ship not too far from her. After gesturing them to follow her with her hand, Mavis turned around and flew away. Fairy Tail's wizards landed their ship on the beach and tried their best to catch up to her, but she was simply floating away too fast for any of them to follow. Soon enough, she disappeared from view, but when the group tried to search for the girl, they were able to find something, or rather someone with a familiar mop of pink hair buried under the dirt. Natsu? Max said while the rest gasped in shock. As quickly as he could, he ran as fast as he could and got to the Fire Dragon Slayer's side. After giving a quick check to make sure that he was still alive and breathing, he grabbed his shoulder, while Jet and Droid tried to pull him from the ground. Natsu, get a hold of yourself. Wake up, your bastard, Warren cried out. What? Shut up. Natsu roared and busted himself of the ground, ready to fight. Natsu, wah. Jet, Warren and Droid cried and threw themselves at him with their arms wrapped tightly around Natsu's neck, bringing him into a giant bear hug much to his shock. From afar, Mavis watched. The smile had never left her face. Any last word? But the next second, the first master of Fairy Tail flinched and forced a smile to her smile when she heard his voice and felt something pointy touch the back of her neck, which shouldn't be possible because she was a ghost and anything that wasn't spiritual would simply pass through her. But still, she knew all too well that only he was capable of doing something like that. It's been a while, brat. Eep. The blonde squealed in shock when she was grabbed by the back of her dress and lifted into the air. Put me down, Naruto. I thought we have already gotten over this. She whined childishly while swinging her arms around when she came face to face with him. You have gotten over this, I, meanwhile, haven't. He twisted the kunai around and flicked her nose with the curve end of the rein, causing her to pout and puff her cheek out in annoyance. Cheeky brat. Do I have to remind you once again that this is my island? But I was born here. She crossed her arms over her chest and stated clearly. Excuse me, but did it make Tenro your island? He asked, with a deadpanned expression, but Mavis only stuck her tongue at him. Naruto then dropped Mavis much to her surprise, causing her to land on her butt. Alright brat, I will give you 2 minutes. You get those people off my island, or I will do it myself. Alright geez, there is no need to be such a jerk. Mavis stood up while rubbing her butt. At least give me a few more minutes to properly greet them. Speaking of which, why don't you come with me? No, Naruto stated coldly. What about Urza? Don't you want to meet her again after all this time? 2 minutes, no more. Putting his hands into his pockets, Naruto responded with the same tone, looking away with a blank bored look on his face. Jerk, brat, heartless bastard, midget, asshole. Is she trying to mimic Zara? Naruto thought before smirking. Do you even know what that word means? Are you really questioning my intellect? Mavis pouted as she crossed her arms over her chest. Time to move, the clock is ticking. She saw him waving his hand dismissively, urging her to do it as fast as she could. However, the moment she turned her head back, a quick plan formed in her head. She smirked evilly. When the lost members of Fairy Tail had been awakened, Mavis stepped forward and cleared her throat, making herself known to everyone. Hello everyone. She greeted them softly with a warm smile on her face. I'm very happy to finally meet all of you for the first time. My name is Mavis, Fairy Tail's first master, Mavis Vermilion. She introduced, causing Fairy Tail, save for the current master, to cry out in shock. How? Urza said in surprise, looking at the first master with wide eyes, much like everyone else. I passed away a long time ago, so this is just an ethereal body. She responded, closing her eyes. Back then, I took the strength of everyone's bonds and faith and converted all of it into magical power. All of your thoughts allowed one of the 3 great fairy magic, Fairy Sphere, to be activated. It's an absolute defensive magic that will protect the guild from any evil. However, everyone was sealed in a frozen state. Though it's been released, a span of 7 years has passed. They all gasped. It was the 7 years of nothing. What now? So it was the first who protected us. Makarov said between tears, grinning at the young woman with long golden hair. It's nothing. Since I converted everyone's strength into magic, I had to give it my all. Mavis smiled. Unwavering faith and resilient bonds will bring even miracles to your side. She then looked at them and smiled with her head tilted to the side. It's becoming a wonderful guild, third. It truly is, Mavis-sama. Makarov smiled back at her, and everyone all nodded their heads in agreement. Meanwhile, Naruto was checking the time. It had been 2 minutes and 10 seconds. It's time for him to kick them out of his island. He had plenty ninjutsu to wash them out of his island, but a tropical storm should be more than enough. Before you go, there's someone I would like to introduce to you all. Mavis suddenly said, causing Naruto to stop channeling his chakra. While I was the one who created Fairy Sphere, he made sure you're all safe from Acnologia. Mavis continued brightly, too brightly. His name is Naruto Uzumaki, and he is. But before she could finish her introduction, Naruto appeared right next to her and slammed his right fist into the top of her head. There, happy now? Naruto asked in annoyance as he glared at Mavis, who held her head with both hands, tears threatening to fall from her eyes. With a sigh, he turned his head and looked at the members of Fairy Tail, who were staring at him with wide eyes. With a quick scan, he was able to remember all of their faces, and the rest of their facial appearances, something he ignored 7 years ago in favor of their battles. His attention shifted to Natsu for a second time, before stopping at Urza. Urza almost flinched. She could swear that he, Naruto Uzumaki, was looking right at her. She believed they had never met before in the past, and yet Urza Scarlet could feel something very familiar about him. Oddly enough, she felt warm when she looked back at him. He gave her the warm and heartfelt feelings of the people who had taken care of her and shaped her into the woman she was now for the past 19 years, and she wasn't thinking about Makarov. Sure, he had been nothing but a grandfather to her ever since she joined Fairy Tail, but it was the people who came before him, before she joined Fairy Tail that gave her all those feelings. He also looked a lot like someone she used to know. Ahem. Naruto cleared his throat to break the silence before saying, since this midget has already spilt the bean. You guys have already known my name, but I think a proper introduction must be included. He pointed at Mavis, before putting both hands behind his back. My name is Naruto Uzumaki and I'm a member of Fairy Tail, the owner of this island. The immortal shinobi and the first master of Fairy Tail finished his introduction at the same time, causing everyone to gasp in surprise. Naruto turned his head slightly to the side and glared at Mavis, who stuck her tongue out at him before grinning brightly. What do you mean when you said you were the owner of this island? Makarov was the first person to ask, isn't Tenro Mavis home, but my ancestor had been here even before her. We're the owner of this land before you people come here and lay waste to it. It's our birthright, Naruto replied blankly, lying straight through his teeth. However, his statement wasn't completely untruthful, because his ancestor had been there before her, and even before him. Is he telling the truth, Master Mavis? Mira asked. Naruto turned to look at the girl in question and silently promised her unimaginable pain and humiliation if she dared to spill the whole truth. Yes, he is. Mavis Vermilion nodded. Hold on, you're a Fairy Tail's mage? Laxus decided to ask after that. He was the oldest member of the current younger generation and yet he'd never seen Naruto before. And he didn't look any older than him. But I'd never seen you joining our guild before. I have been staying here for most of my life, Naruto said shortly. But, for most of my life, Naruto repeated, interrupting the Lightning Dragon Slayer with the same tone. Speaking of which, the livings are unwelcomed here, so I will give you 30 seconds to climb on that ship. He pointed his hand at the direction of the ship on the beach. And move your ass off my island before I do the walking for you. He sounds like poor Lyuzuka, Natsu exclaimed. If you are comparing me to some old coot, Naruto put his hands together and formed a hand seal. Something that didn't go unnoticed by a certain redhead, immediately making the sky darken with lightning cracking violently on the clouds, causing Fairy Tail to look on in shock. Then shall I guarantee you that I am nothing like this, poor Lyuzuka? Whoa, how is he doing that? Natsu said as he looked at the sky. That's awesome. Kya, that's not awesome. Lucy cried when one of the bolts of lightning struck the spot beside her. Let's get out of here. Yes, I think it's time for us to leave. Makarov nodded and was about to continue but stopped when he saw Urza raising her hand to stop them. Please hold on a second, Master. Urza said as she stepped forward. I want to ask him a few questions. Naruto raised an eyebrow but he didn't say anything. Standing beside him, Mavis was smiling. It turned out better than she thought. Have we met before? No, we have never met in person. So, are you familiar with Minato Namikaze? Everyone turned her head to look at Urza after that. He's my father. The immortal shinobi answered truthfully, causing Urza to widen her eyes in surprise. Really? You're his son? Naruto shrugged his shoulders. I didn't know. You probably didn't. Naruto replied, what was he to you? He was my teacher, the one who taught me requip magic, Urza answered, and the rest of Fairy Tail couldn't help but gasp. It was a story she had never shared with anyone. He also taught me everything I know, and showed me the way of my magic. He was like a father to me. Well, that explained it. Naruto crossed his arms on his chest. He might be a great guy to his student, but he's not much of a father to his own child. That was particularly true, in more way than one. You know that is not true. You want to argue with me? Naruto asked, glaring at her. He was an ass, I tell you. He was my teacher, someone I could call my father. Urza summoned her sword and pointed it at him. I won't stand it if you continue to badmouth him like that. She growled and Naruto rolled his eyes. Alright, please calm down, Urza. Realizing the tense atmosphere between the two, Mira stepped in front of her best friend and put her hand on her shoulders and said to her, hoping to calm Urza down, we will leave your island immediately. Mira turned around and smiled to Naruto, please excuse us. She tried to push her away, but Urza refused to move and continued to glare at Naruto. When the Fairy Tail's mages started to move, they were stopped and it was Mavis who did that. Hold on. Mavis stepped forward and turned around to face Naruto, holding her hands behind her back. Naruto. What? Naruto didn't like the smile on Mavis' face. It promised troubles for him. Why don't you come with them? Excuse me? You're a member of Fairy Tail, right? Since when did he become a member of Fairy Tail? Why don't you try the life as one of its members for the first time? Naruto was about to answer without taking a second to think of a response, but Mavis beat him to it by continuing, I promise you it's going to be very fun. She then clapped her hands together and gave him the infamous big puppy dog eyes, something that combined with her cuteness, was overkill even for someone like him. Please Naruto, do it for me, just this time. What do you say Naruto, would you like to come with us? Master Makarov asked with a grin, you're a member of Fairy Tail. What more, you seem like a good friend of the first. We would be more than happy to take you in as an official member. He completely ignored Makarov's words. Okay fine, Naruto said finally and flicked Mavis on the forehead, knocking her down to her butt, but the spirit of the first master of Fairy Tail smiled brightly nonetheless. Most likely Sila's breakfast would have to be eaten by his clone because he couldn't think of any better option. Mira Jane Strauss, the famous drawing card Fairy Tail, smiled brightly as she danced between the chairs and tables to serve cups of beer and to the members of Fairy Tail. Everyone around the small guild's hall was drinking, singing, and talking with each other, as if they were trying to make up for the 7 years of lost time, of nothing but tears and sadness for the left-behind members of Fairy Tail. They were no longer the best guild of Earthland, but she didn't care all that much because the guild was still pretty much the same as before. After all, it was the members of Fairy Tail that was matter. Nearly a decade had passed in real time, and yet Mira Jane was still the same 19-years-old young woman from 7 years ago. She was still the beautiful young woman of below-average height, with long wavy white hair which curled slightly at the ends and 2 bangs framing her face and reaching down to her chest, following by an upward ponytail obtained by gathering and tying the hair covering her forehead. She had large blue eyes and a curvy, voluptuous body with very large S. Mira was wearing a beautiful sleeveless, ankle-length maroon dress with a pleated skirt, with high-heeled shoes that matched her dress, accessorized with a small chain necklace with a blue oval gem attached to it, and a bracelet made of white flowers circling her right wrist. All in all, she hadn't aged a single day, and the same could be said for the other fairies on Tenro when Acnologia attacked them. Fairy Sphere was truly an amazing spell, Mira had to admit, because not only did it protect her and everyone from Acnologia but it also protected them from time itself, keeping them in a static state for many years before disappearing. She was grateful for what the first master had done to protect them, and 7 years of life was but a meager price to pay for such miracle. Here's your order, Urza. Mira smiled brightly as she gave the red-haired knightess, who had changed out of her usual set of armor and was now wearing a normal high-collar long-sleeve blouse and blue skirt, a medium slice of strawberry cheesecake on a dish with silver fork, something she happily accepted and started serving herself. Is it good? The barmaid asked in amusement when she saw the happy smile and heard moan of satisfaction from her best friend. It is very delicious. Urza nodded her head with a smile, beaming at Mira. Thanks a lot, Mira. Please don't mention it. She then turned her eye away to a table at a corner of the tavern for a moment before turning back to Urza. So, how is your guy? My guy? Who? Urza asked in confusion before looking at the direction Mira was looking a moment ago. You mean him? For your information Mira, he's not my guy and to answer your question, he is not doing anything suspicious yet. The Queen of Fairies scolded. Clearly, her opinions about him hadn't changed one bit, mainly because he had done nothing to change that. Literally, nothing. From the moment Naruto Uzumaki, who was sitting with his feet on the table and leaning back on 2 legs of his chair, stepped his foot into Fairy Tail's building, if they could call the tavern their guild building, he had created his own space, completely separated himself from the others. He found himself a table at a corner of the room, said nothing and enjoyed the drink Mira gave him in silence. Sometimes, Mira heard him making a few comments every time a fight broke out between the male members of the guild, but other than that, he stayed in complete silence. So, he is really your teacher's son? It came out as a question. Mira had never met Urza's teacher before, and because of their rivalry when they were younger, Urza had never shared her life outside the guild to her, but she first learned about him from eavesdropping one of the conversations about him between Urza and the master a few years ago. Yes, he is. I mean he looks just like his father. Urza rolled her eyes and then continued distastefully, but he is nothing like Minato-sensei. He has never mentioned his son before? Urza shook her head in response. Mira then held the empty tray to her chest and asked with a smile. You really have a lot of respect for your teacher, don't you, Urza? Respect? Mira, I love him like a father. Urza answered, smiling warmly at the thought of her teacher. I grew up looking up to Minato-sensei. He was the one who taught me how to fight, how to survive, how to take care of myself, and a lot more than just my magic. I wouldn't be half the person I am today without him. Mira gasped slightly in surprise when Urza crossed her arms over her chest and looked at Naruto again. She wasn't expecting that. I would be honored to call someone like Sensei my father, something she didn't know if she had or not. He is really amazing, isn't he? Yes, he is. Urza smiled before looking at Naruto, growling quietly in annoyance. He is Minato-sensei's biological son and yet. Come on, Urza, give him a chance, will you? Mira smiled. I mean, you barely know him. Something must have happened between the two of them to make him dislike his father like that, don't you think? Urza nodded her head, but she didn't say anything. She had thought about that. She couldn't stand it if someone badmouthed him, especially when that someone was his own son. Minato Namikaze was a man who had come to become a father figure to her around the time she tried to master her magic and was still affected by the horrible days at the Tower of Heaven. He was a great man, an amazing teacher and an even greater father. She refused to believe that Naruto hated his dad without a reason. Something, which in her opinion must be a misunderstanding, must have happened to give him such a negative about his teacher, and she intended to find out what it was. However, looking at him right now, she didn't know if she could approach Naruto and talk about Minato Namikaze without starting a fight with him. They had a rough start, so it would be best for both of them if she kept her distance for the time being. Unknown to both girls, Naruto was listening to their conversation and was paying extra attention to Urza's opinions about her teacher. He is a member of Fairy Tail. Mira continued as she removed her hands from her chest and put them on her hips. Master Mavis has accepted him into our guild. He is one of us, so you shouldn't be too hard on him. She then added before Urza could say anything, though, you have to admit that he's hot. When she heard that, the scarlet-haired mage nearly choked on the soft piece of cake she was eating, which was almost impossible. I mean, way hotter than the guys we have here. Don't you have work to do? Sorry, I was just kidding around. Mira giggled before asking, oh, one more thing, what happened to your teacher? Well, he left for a journey to the other countries after my training was over. Urza answered with a sigh. I haven't heard anything about him again since then. I'm sure that you will meet him again one day, Urza, Mira said as she put her hand on her friend's shoulder and squeezed comfortingly. Yeah, I really hope so. She smiled because she too had a lot of hope that they would meet again one day. Maybe Naruto would know where he was, so she would have to ask him about it later on. The party continued for 12 more minutes before the door of the small tavern was pushed open and 5 very familiar faces walked in with a smile on their face. Welcome back, everyone. Sherry Blendy waved to them cheerfully. She was a young, beautiful woman with blue eyes, pink hair, large S, and a curvaceous body. She wore a black vest top and matching skirt. The vest sported a collar and tie reaching only to her mid-chest, leaving her navel, belly and the under-inside portion of her S completely exposed. She also wore a dark hairband with points resembling cat ears, and long black gloves reaching to her upper arms. Looks like it's turned back into a noisy guild. The one who said that was Leon Vastia, accompanied by Jura Nikis, Yuka Suzuki and Toby Horhorda. Leon was a slim young man of average height with a muscular and toned body. He had bluish silver hair, most of which were spiky strands that jut upwards on top of his head, except for some which are kept pointing down and partially cover the upper left part of his face. You guys. Seeing his rival and the members of his team, Gray Fullbuster stood up from his seat and exclaimed in surprise. Lamia Scale. Lucy gasped, following Gray's example. Lamia Scale was one of Fairy Tail's allies during their mission to destroy one of the strongest dark guild of the Balam Alliance, Oracion Cis. When we searching for Tenro Island, Blue Pegasus and Lamia really helped us out. One of the guild's members informed them, forcing Gray to make a smile while Leon simply smirked. Well, it looks like we're in their debt now. Don't worry about it, Blue Pegasus was the one who made it out there first, but we have much more power, Leon smirked confidently. Who cares about that? Gray's sweat dropped, saying uncaringly. Well, in these past 7 years, we Lamia Scale have climbed up to the number 2 guild in Fury. Sherry said with a smile, putting her hand to the above of her sizable chest. It's too bad for you, Lucy-san. So, does that mean number 1 is Blue Pegasus? Lucy asked curiously. Of course not, Toby cried dramatically. There's no way that could happen. Settle down, Yuka tried to calm his friend before turning back to Lucy. No, it's not Blue Pegasus. Well, enough about that everyone. Juris smiled as he put his hands into the sleeves of his dark-colored haori. What important is that everyone is okay. His eyes then caught sight of the young man who was sitting all by himself in a corner of the guild hall. Since Fairy Tail was in the middle of a party, such a sight was something very strange to see. The blonde was also an unfamiliar face, so he couldn't help but ask, and who is that young man over there? We have never met him before, haven't we? Who I am is none of your business. Naruto spoke up lazily as he folded his hands behind his head and leant back even further. The chair looked like it was about to fall backwards at any second, but for some reason, Naruto was still keeping it in balance on the ground without any problem. What is his problem? Sherry couldn't help but ask, putting her hands on her hips. He's just shy, that's all, Mira said with a small smile. Naruto chose to ignore her comment and went back to finish his drink. Anyway, realizing that Naruto wasn't going to say anything in response, Leon turned back to Gray. That being said, I believe it's time for us to take our leave. The Ice Mage of Fairy Tail nodded his head and held out his hand for his rival, who immediately took it in a firm handshake. I'm glad you guys are finally back because things were not as interesting as they used to be without Fairy Tail around. Good luck, Fairy Tail, Juris smiled, because you're going to need it to climb back to your position and regain your reputation. And you guys better watch it because we're back now. Natsu declared and punched the palm of his right hand with a flaming fist while grinning confidently. Nodding his head, Leon turned around and left the guild. The members of his team quickly followed after him, with Sherry being the one who stayed behind for a few more seconds to say goodbye to Lucy. The blonde happily accepted it before biting the doll mage a warm goodbye. The party continued, and Naruto was thinking about leaving the place to go back to his house with Sayla, when he suddenly noticed a mop of spiky pink hair appeared from below at the other end of his table, accompanied by the top of the head of a certain blue cat. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto put his feet down to the ground and leant forward to look at them. What are you two doing? Naruto asked when Natsu, who had his scarf wrapped around his forehead and probably the lower half of his face, and Happy the cat looked at him from their positions. We're wondering if you are a ninja, Natsu asked in curiosity. Happy spoke his trademark catchphrase and nodded his head in agreement. What make you think that I am a ninja? Naruto asked. You put your hands like this when you used your magic. The Fire Dragon Slayer put his hand together in the most common hand seal known by the people outside of the shinobi world, the ram seal. It's a ninja's signature, right? Where did you even get that idea from? Do you even know the differences between a ninja and a mage? The immortal shinobi rolled his eyes. Natsu raised his hand and pointed to a certain young woman in the small building, but before he could answer his question, Naruto continued, forget it. I don't want to know the answer. It's probably something stupid anyway. He muttered under his breath, and of course, with his enhanced hearing, Natsu heard it. Speaking of magic, what type of magic do you use, Naruto? Lucy decided to ask when she realized Natsu was on the verge of exploding right into his face. You can manipulate the weather or something? What Naruto did was something she had never seen before, but read about it in some of the magic books. It was an extremely advanced magic that allowed the user to manipulate the weather. Storm magic was its name if she recalled correctly. Sorry, but that is for me to know, Naruto answered casually. Since you are Urza's magic teacher's son, do you know Requip magic too? The guild immediately became dead silence, and Natsu immediately realized it was very stupid of him to ask that question. They could only nervously look between Urza and Naruto, who, for the first time of the day, had finally looked at each other in the eyes. Well, Urza broke the silence, crossing her arms over her chest. Do you? That is four. But before he could finish his answer, which was the same one he gave Lucy, Naruto felt his inner alarms blare and immediately brought his hand out to summon a sword in defense. He heard the clanking sound of metal clash with metal when he felt an opposing force on his sword, but showed no surprise when he saw Urza standing in front of him with a sword in hand. Impatient, aren't you? Naruto asked and Urza smirked in response, while the other members of Fairy Tail looked at the both of them in surprise. They had never seen anyone who had the ability to re-equip just as fast as Urza and managed to block her strike without any problem like that. It's because you're not going to answer your question, she explained before looking at Naruto's sword, a katana. You're very fast, aren't you? She expected nothing less from the son of her teacher, who was the only person that could use re-equip faster than her. I thought the brat over there was the one who wanted to pick a fight with me. Naruto made a gesture toward Natsu, who yelled in frustration for being called brat once again, but was held back by Lucy and Gray. You want to fight me too? He asked. The burning determination in her eyes, something he was so familiar with, had already answered his question. I would like to see exactly how strong you are. Urza spoke. I want to test my strength against Minato-sensei's son. Naruto immediately clicked his tongue in displeasure. What? You're afraid of getting your ass kicked by his student? She said tauntingly, but Naruto didn't feel bothered by it one bit. Instead, he decided to say, I know what you're trying to do, Urza Scarlet. His statement caused Urza to widen her eyes slightly in surprise. Are you trying to prove that you're better? That you have more right to call yourself my father's child more than I do? Seeing the troubled expression on Urza's face, Naruto smirked. Well, you can run around and call him daddy as much as you want, but do not tell me to do the same thing. He has never been much of a father to me anyway, he said, taking his sword back and making it disappear. From the beginning, everything that happened was because of him. He was a failure as a man and a bigger failure as a father. He failed to save the love of his life. He failed to protect his own child from the horrible childhood, and little did they know that Naruto wasn't just talking about his father. What happened between you and him? Urza asked slowly. Her expression softened a little when she stood up and put away her sword. She was right about him. Shit happened, young lady, Naruto said as he leant back and put his feet on the table, folding his hands behind his head. Shit happened. Urza could only wonder what he meant by that. Would you like another drink? Mira asked cheerily as she appeared at his side with a cup of beer in her hand. You can put it on my table, Naruto said shortly, not taking his eyes off the book he was reading. On the table at his left was a stack of books, something he had brought out from nowhere. He had seen him with since his conversation with Urza was over. With a smile on her face, Mira replaced Naruto's empty cup with the one she was holding. Thank you. He nodded his head to her and picked up the cup to take a sip. He could not get drunk no matter how much he drank, but a good beer was still something he greatly enjoyed. Fairy Tail might look like a dump, but they had good drinks, something he was grateful for. What are you reading, Naruto? Mira asked with interest, trying to have a glimpse of the inside of the book. Don't you think you should introduce yourself first before trying to start a conversation? I don't even know your name. His words caused her to blush in embarrassment. Now that she had thought about it, she hadn't properly introduced to him yet. I'm so sorry. Where is my manner? Bringing her usual sweet smile back to her face and doing her best to return it to the normal healthy color, Mira introduced herself, putting her hand on her chest. My name is Mira Jane Strauss, but you can call. But before she could finish her introduction, Naruto interrupted. Do not worry, I know who you are. From the stack of books, Naruto pulled out an old weekly issue of the Sorcerer magazine and showed it to her. The beautiful model featured on the first page was none other than Mira, dressed in a white bikini top, a very short skirt, and nothing else. Oh, looking at the picture of herself in revealing outfit, Mira could only nod her head in understanding. However, she immediately pouted when she looked at him. You were teasing me, weren't you? Just because I have daddy issue doesn't mean that I don't have a sense of humor. Naruto answered with a shrug of his shoulders. So you like what you're seeing on this page? Mira asked as she picked up the magazine and held it to her chest, making the same seductive smile that she did at the photo shoot years ago. Naruto stared at her and the Sorcerer magazine for a moment before replying, it would be a lie if I didn't. Well then, I'm glad that you're not a brooding emo. Mira giggled at the thought, while Naruto could only chuckle at her statement. What make you think that? He had been many things. A troublemaker, a noisy ramen-loving orange-wearing brat, a good friend, a hero, a strong leader, a father, but a brooding emo was definitely not one of them. Becoming one was also not one of his big plans for the future. I have my imagination. Mira lightly tapped her head while playfully rolling her eyes. Naruto suddenly had the feelings that her imagination wasn't something he should underestimate. Well, let me tell you that I am anything but an emo. It's just that I don't feel like talking. I'm surprised, but I believe you. Mira giggled. Why, you're married? A familiar voice caught Naruto and Mira's attention, and when they turned their heads to that direction, they saw Urza looking at Alzak and Biska with her eyes widened as wide as dinner plates. While blushing rather girlishly, she also appeared to be caught off guard. Yeah, for about 6 years now, Alzak replied. That's right, Urza-san. And you know what? I was the one who proposed. Biska said with a smile, nudging her husband with her elbow. He was so nervous and… Can we just skip that part? Alzak chuckled in embarrassment. See, congratulations. Urza stammered while bowing. I might be a little inexperienced and naive, but please take care of me. She continued nervously to Alzak. Oofufu? Mira giggled as she looked at her best friend. It was actually not rare for her to see Urza, who had always had a strong and confident aura around her, acting so feminine like that, so she was the only one who wasn't surprised by the knight's strange behavior. She has somehow warped the whole thing around to being her, hasn't she? Well, she better not think about it. Naruto muttered, it's better for young people to not think about love at this age, since there are so much more to the world around them. His eyes widened slightly when he realized what he had just said, but it was too late because Mira had heard it. That's deep, you know? Mira asked humorously, and here I thought you didn't think much of the people around you? I guess I was dead wrong about you, wasn't I? Don't you have work to do? And now you sound exactly like Urza. 20 years older, and I would definitely mistake you for a wise old man, or Urza would mistake you for her teacher. Naruto continued to look at her, his face remained devoid of emotion. However, even after that, the smile didn't disappear completely from her face. Oh, relax, I'm just kidding. Enjoying yourself, aren't you? Naruto asked as he looked back to the book he was reading. However, before Mira could make any comment about it, a certain pink-haired dragon slayer charged at Naruto with a huge grin on his face and a flaming fist, with the full intention of punching the immortal shinobi in the face. Naruto Uzumaki, however, could see Natsu's attempt to attack him coming from a mile away. By moving his head out of the way, Naruto dodged Natsu's punch at the last second, causing the pink-haired dragon slayer's fist to collide with the table instead. Oi, don't run around attack people like that. Most of the members of Fairy Tail screamed out in a dramatic manner, pointing their hands at Natsu. Surprise? Naruto muttered mockingly as he bent down to pick up his books. G0 Ivan his personality, Naruto was actually a bit surprised that it took Natsu that long to make up his mind and challenge him. Here you go, Mira said as she gave Naruto some of the books she had picked up from the floor. Thank you. Naruto nodded before making them disappear in a flash of light. Natsu, Urza said sternly, standing up from her seat, just what do you think you are doing? I'm challenging him, what else? Natsu stood up, punching his palm with fire flared around his body, grinning confidently before pointing his finger at Naruto. I challenge you to a fight, Naruto. Why should I fight you? Naruto asked, folding his arms on his chest. You're strong, and I want to become stronger. Natsu grinned. You use the same magic as Urza, so if I defeat you, I will be stronger than her. What ridiculous logic. Naruto muttered, do you even have a brain inside that head of yours? It's still hard for him to believe that Natsu was actually Zarev's brother. He was literally all brawls and no brain. Anyone wants to stop him? Naruto asked, looking around the guild. Well, Natsu will always be Natsu, Makarov said. He looked drunk. He won't stop bugging you unless you give him exactly what he wants. Gildart continued with a chuckle. You should fight him. Urza spoke up as she crossed her arms over her chest, tilting her head to the side. He just wants to fight you, so better give it to him sooner than later. Alright then, it's not like I have anything better to do. I will fight you, Natsu. Naruto accepted the challenge. Natsu cheered out loudly, however. He then reached his hands into his pockets and pulled out 5 very familiar wallets to the members of Team Natsu. If I win, I will take all of your money, including your team's money as well. Those who were drinking immediately spat their beer out of their mouth when Natsu, Lucy, Urza, Gray and Wendy checked their pockets and found them empty. When did you steal it? They all cried and pointed their hands at Naruto. Even Urza's wallet, which she kept in her pocket dimension, was stolen, much to their shock and amazement. I will also cook your cats. Ignoring their question, Naruto continued with a devious smirk, and much to everyone's shock again, He raised his other hand, which was holding Happy, Carla and Lily's by their tails. Carla, Happy, Lily. The whole guild broke out in laughter. I'm serious. His tone immediately caused the laughter to die down and everyone to look at him in shock. Oi, don't make a joke like that. Natsu shouted and tried to grab his wallet as well as Happy, who along with Carla and Lily were getting very uncomfortable. Give me back Happy and my money. Naruto then released the cat, but he still kept the wallets in his hands. Still want to fight me? Naruto asked as he put the wallets away with his magic. You better choose wisely because I'm not going to return them when it's over. Fine, let's do this. Natsu declared, pointing his hand at Naruto. You're on. Hold on. Lucy stood up from her seat and looked at Natsu. That's all my money. What if you lose? Wendy, who was sitting beside her, nervously nodded her head. That's right, don't forget that you've never beat Urza to begin with. Gray pointed out. From what they could see, Naruto was strong. Maybe as powerful as Urza because of his requip speed and the ability to block her strike with ease. Being the son of her teacher, there was no telling what tricks he had up his sleeve, and fighting an opponent whose magic and styles you're completely unfamiliar with wasn't something someone could fully prepare beforehand. They're right, Natsu. Urza stepped forward, stating firmly, it's not like I'm doubting your strength, but what if you lose? We're going to lose all of our money? She had never doubted Natsu and his power, as she had always thought that he was someone stronger than her. She had to admit that she secretly wanted to see Naruto's strength, but she was more worried for her money. She didn't care about Natsu in the slightest, because Naruto had the element of surprise on his side and that could be what was going to decide the outcome of the battle. Don't worry, I'm going to kick this guy's ass. Natsu smirked, cracking his knuckle, but even with that much determination, Lucy wasn't convinced. Sigh, alright, how about this? Naruto said while making a thoughtful expression. He lose, I will take his money, but you guys can find a way to take your back later. How? Lucy asked nervously. That's for you to figure it out. Naruto finished with a small chuckle. So? Still want to fight? Natsu nodded while grinning widely. Good. Anyone else wants to stop him? He looked around. The members of Team Natsu remained silent. How Lucy looked like she wanted to argue while Wendy was too nervous and shy to say anything, but in the end, the girls didn't say anything much like Gray. A few minutes later, everyone was waiting and longing for a good show to take place. Some prattled about random things while others were placing bets to predict the winner and of course, Kana was taking everyone's bets. Naruto and Natsu's fighting ground was a large open area of grass and dirt in the middle of the lush forest near Magnolia Town. The wizards of Fairy Tail were gathered around the southern rim of the area. Natsu ignited flames around his body in anticipation. Come on, let's get this fight started already. He cried out with Naruto standing in front of him. Keep your shorts on, Kana shouted at Natsu. A barrel of beer was by her side while she gathered bets from other members of the guild. I still got people placing their bets. Everyone was betting on Naruto to win. Only his teammates were praying that Natsu was going to come out with the victory, so they could get back their money. Gar, I want to fight him already. Natsu then pointed his finger to Naruto, who held a rather relaxed stance for someone about to fight, shifting his weight to one leg and placing a hand on his hip. Impatient, aren't you? Naruto said while making a thoughtful expression. You know what? I think I will add one more rule to our fight. If you manage to land even a slightest of blow on me, you will win. Everyone gasped in surprise, no one more than Urza. What, are you looking down on me? Natsu cried out. Nope, I'm very serious right here. Naruto responded and held out his hand. Come at me with the intent to kill, brat, or else you might get killed instead. Urza finished and saw that everyone was looking at her. Minato-sensei said the same thing. Everyone paled, no longer wondering why she was so much more powerful than them. What kind of hellish training had Urza gone through with her teacher? Meanwhile, Naruto couldn't stop himself from smiling. She remembered. Alright then. Natsu ignited his fist on fire and sprinted at Naruto. Karyu no. But even before he could make a punch, the Fire Dragon Slayer suddenly felt his eyes swirl into black and red without his initiative. The next instant, Natsu realized he was facing away from Naruto, with his right arm kept behind his head. He tried to move, but stopped and had his blood turned cold when he suddenly felt something pointy at the back of his neck. I haven't said start yet, Naruto said casually, holding Natsu by his wrist. and a knife at the back of his head. Much like Natsu, those who were watching from outside the ring was startled by his speed. Urza gulped nervously. That was a lot faster than her teacher. Naruto was fast, yet he didn't look like he was trying to. It meant that he could move even faster than that. Remember, I'm not your friend. I'm not part of your family. Right now, I'm your enemy. Naruto told stoically, steel your nerves, gather your resolve. Imagine me as someone who is trying to hurt the people you care about. He released Natsu and the boy took a few steps forward before turning around to look at Naruto, who smiled when he saw the determination in Natsu's eyes. If you're ready, then let's start. That night, when Naruto stepped foot into the two-story house at the coast of Fury and made his way to the living room without making the slightest of sound, like a true shinobi would when he sneaked into enemy territory, he was greeted with a sight that amused him and annoyed him at the same time. The man, who was none other than his shadow clone, was sitting on the lawn in the middle of the room, sporting a blissful smile on his face as he leant back and rested the back of his head against the headrest of his seat. Now, even though only his head was visible, as the rest of his body being hidden behind the backrest of the comfortable lounge, Naruto knew full well that his clone was naked from the waist down, and his impressive manhood was rock hard and standing at full attention. Better yet, there was a woman kneeling on the floor between his spread legs as if it was her proper place and using her mouth to pleasure him like a good, and naughty, little servant she was. After a moment of doing nothing, allowing his clone to enjoy the pleasurable and amazing service of their beautiful demonic servant for a few more seconds, Naruto decided to speak up to let both of them know about his presence. You two are very lucky that I'm in a good mood. Almost instantly, both of them jumped. Clone Naruto turned around and looked at the original in surprise, while Sayla, who were naked save for her knee-length socks, hurriedly stood up from her position and looked at her master, her real master nervously. Boss, you're back. The clone greeted cheerfully, but in truth, he was rather nervous. The boss walked into the house and he didn't know anything about it, surpassing himself. Naruto was just that good. How long had Naruto been watching him with Sayla? He had no idea. Master, welcome back. She bowed her head deeply, fully unaware that her action caused her large S to jiggle. Having with his clone, which was basically him, wasn't counted as doing so with someone else behind his back, right? It wasn't the first time she had done it with his clones, or even more than a handful of his clones, but it was actually the first time her master, the original Naruto Uzumaki, didn't know anything about it. To begin with, having with her wasn't the clone's mission, as he was sent home to have breakfast with her and keep her company while he was gone for the day. How was? Wipe your mouth first, Sayla. The Aetherius blushed and hurriedly used the handkerchief her master gave her to wipe the drool and saliva from the corners of her lips and her chin. She had basically made a mess on her face while sucking him in the most pleasurable way possible. And you, Naruto turned to his clone, dispel yourself before I do. The clone laughed nervously and did what he was told. Everything the clone had experienced immediately rushed into his head. It was a rather uneventful day for Sayla and his clone, but nonetheless, it was much more interesting than his morning with Fairy Tail. Sayla's breakfast for him was absolutely horrible and downright disgusting, but the clone managed to force down every dish with a smile to make her happy, something he realized Sayla was truly grateful for. They spent the entire morning training, keeping each other in the best shape before Naruto took Sayla out for lunch, and enjoyed the rest of the day peacefully and quietly on the beach with her. It began when dinner was finally over. They started with a passionate kiss, which heated up after a few seconds, before moving on to something more physical. Sayla couldn't resist, not that she tried to when the clone removed her clothes from her body and started feasting on her S before working his way around the rest of her body. He took his time, taking all the pleasure in hearing the moans that escaped her mouth. His hands reached out for her S as his face buried between her thighs, drenching his chin, his nose and filling his mouth with her juice while his tongue was moving inside her. To make it short, it was going to be one hell of a night, and the clone was definitely enjoying himself, until the original Naruto arrived and ruined all the fun with his presence. Well, enjoying yourself a little bit too much, weren't you? Naruto asked and continued before Sayla could say anything. Relax Sayla, I'm just teasing. I'm not mad at you or anything. It's not really your first time with one of my clones, wasn't it? But you didn't know, Sayla said, lowering her head in shame. That's alright. The clones are copies of myself, so in a way, It shows me just how much I want to get my hands all over you, and inside you. Sayla blushed, but she smiled nonetheless. Wasn't something she was shy about, and her master knew it very well. Come here. Just because my clone has already spent some high-quality time with you doesn't mean that I have. The Aetherius happily let herself fall into his arms and pressed her naked body against his, allowing her master to wrap his arms around her and place his hands on her back before pressing his lips against hers. How was your day, master? The clone had filled her in with the basic, so she knew where he had gone to. Was it boring? You must be bored out of your mind. Her hand moved away from his hip and traveled down to his pants, where she wasn't hesitated to put them into. Would you like me to entertain you? She asked, trying her best to be seductive. However, in his opinion, Naruto thought she didn't have to because her voice and the way she usually talked to him alone were seductive enough. Daring, aren't you? Naruto said as he looked away with a thoughtful expression. To tell you the truth, it's not that boring. Things got kind of interesting in the afternoon. How so? Sayla asked curiously. She listened to everything he said, but she didn't care about Fairy Tail all that much. Plus, her master gave no objection when she removed his pants, so she carried on. Would you like to know? Naruto asked, groaning slightly when Sayla took him into her mouth. You know what? I think you should know. The beautiful Aetherius widened her eyes, but her mouth was too busy to give a reply. He took a seat on the lawn, where his clone had sat a few minutes ago, giving him a more comfortable position to tell the story and enjoy the entertainment Sayla could give. He had to admit that he was turned on by the memories of his clone. Earlier that day, remember, I'm not your friend. I'm not part of your family. Right now, I'm your enemy. Naruto told stoically, steel your nerves, gather your resolve. Imagine me as someone who is trying to hurt the people you care about. He released Natsu and the boy took a few steps forward before turning around to look at Naruto, who smiled when he saw the surprise but still burning determination in Natsu's eyes. If you're ready, then let's start. All right, I'm fired up. Natsu grinned before charging forward. When he was close enough, the Dragon Slayer sent a barrage of punches at Naruto's head, only for the blonde to dodge by moving his body to the sides, moving at an even greater speed than Natsu's punching speed. Calmly, Naruto's hand suddenly shot up and caught Natsu's wrist, stopping him from continuing attacking with his right arm. Almost instantly, Natsu tried to punch Naruto with his left fist, only for the blonde to parry with the back of his other hand. Quicker than his eyes could follow, the immortal shinobi took his hand back and punched Natsu twice, aiming for his midsection. The punches caused Natsu to cough painfully, before he was met with a punch square to the jaw, sending him flying backwards when Naruto released his wrist. Those punches were extremely powerful, and even with a greater endurance than a normal mage, Natsu could feel it very clearly and they made him feel extreme pain, and had enough force to send him away for several meters. He rolled on the ground. His face hit the dirt once before he forced himself to stand up. However, the moment he did so, Naruto was right above him, his right leg in the position for a kick that would most likely come in contact with his face, and given how powerful he could punch, Natsu would give his kick a pass. Karyu no. As quickly as he could, Natsu gathered fire in his mouth before releasing it in a torrent of flame, directing it at Naruto who was on mid-air, Hoko. The fire completely swallowed his body, but when Natsu's roar attack came to an end a second later, with smoke coming out of his mouth, the owner of Tenryujima was nowhere to be found. For the people who were watching from afar, it was as if Naruto could move so fast they thought he teleported. Before the blast of fire could hit him, Naruto disappeared in a blur, and almost instantly he reappeared right behind Natsu. When Natsu realized Naruto was behind him and turned his head around, Naruto suddenly disappeared from his sight once again and then, much to the spectators' shock, appeared at his front, where he was only a second ago. Natsu could only turn his head midway, because Naruto didn't waste any time to send a punch to his right cheek, sending him flying once again. You're making this too easy for me, you know, Naruto spoke up when Natsu managed to pick himself up once again. There was a noticeable bruise on his cheek, but overall, it was nothing serious. Get serious. Don't worry, that was just a warm-up, Natsu declared confidently, unleashing fire from his hands. Something like that wasn't going to take him down, try dodging this. Karyu no, he cried while charging at Naruto, who calmly observed the pink-haired young man's movement standing completely still. Tekken. Natsu punched, with all his might, causing the area in front of him to explode in a wave of dragonfire that once again swallowed Naruto into. Did he get him? Lucy asked. However, she was confused because she didn't understand why Naruto didn't dodge Natsu's attack when he was more than fast enough to do so. Then, before anyone could answer her question, the smoke was cleared by a strong gust of wind and Fairy Tail had their eyes widened in shock when they saw Naruto standing in the same place while holding Natsu's flaming fist as if it was nothing, completely unharmed by Natsu's devastating attack. Even Natsu, who immediately his fist had been stopped, couldn't believe what he was seeing because so far, only Gildart, the strongest of Fairy Tail, had shown the ability to block his punch without moving an inch of his body like that. Is that it? Naruto asked, looking at Natsu's hand with a bored expression, but in his mind, he was thinking very seriously, this is his magic? No wonder why Zarif said he could hardly feel anything. The immortal shinobi tightened his grip around Natsu's knuckle, causing him to wince in pain. What are you doing? Didn't I tell you to come at me with the intent to kill? Get serious. He pushed his arm forward, forcing Natsu onto his knee, or get lost. With the same grip on Natsu, Naruto turned his body around and tossed the boy across the field. TCH. Growling in annoyance, Natsu was able to regain his balance on midair and landed on his 2 feet this time. Using brute force to push forward, the pink-haired young man covered the distance as fast as he could while unleashing a large stream of fire from each of his hand. Take this. Natsu cried and slashed his hand vertically at Naruto, but the blonde only simply raised his hands and parried each flaming fist with enough force to push Natsu back. When the Dragon Slayer tried to kick him, Naruto took a step forward and blocked with his left hand, before slamming his fist onto the top of his head, knocking Natsu down to the ground face first. When he looked up, Natsu's expression became serious. He raised both legs and spun around, igniting his feet with flame, only for Naruto to raise his right leg and block Natsu's kick with his shin. Karyu no. However, this time, he was fully prepared. With a massive amount of fire that had already been gathered in his mouth and lungs, the moment his foot came into contact with Naruto's leg, Natsu opened his mouth and roared like a dragon while he was still having his body upside down, firing a wave of fire that was even larger than his first roar attack at Naruto, Hoko. The range of his attack was even greater than before, carving a path of destruction on the ground, as well as a part of the forest in front of him, setting the trees and plants on fire. How about that? Natsu smirked as he stood up and ended the attack, expecting to find a badly burned Naruto lying on the ground in front of him. However, he was shocked when suddenly a hand shot from the ground and grabbed his ankle, immobilizing him. The next instant, the ground cracked and Naruto burst out from the ground, sending an uppercut at the stunned Dragon Slayer's jaw. Natsu gritted his teeth and sailed back a couple of feet as the punch connected with his face, before landing on his back with a grunt. Old trick never get old. Naruto muttered as he dusted himself off the dirt. Is that it? He asked, looking at Natsu, who was looking at him in disbelief. There was no a single burn on his body, and his clothes looked fine too. There was no way that he could react to an attack so close like that in time. That was smart, but it's not smart enough to catch me off guard. Naruto commented, folding his arms on his chest. He's toying with him. Lucy cried in shock, holding her head with both hands. He's not even using his magic, Gray muttered while sweating slightly. Those attacks were pure physical strength. Are you freaking kidding me? Jet, the mage with high-speed magic, couldn't believe it. He's not using magic and he's already moving that fast, what the hell? And he could hit really hard too. Mira nodded her head, looking at the damage Naruto's uppercut had left on the Dragon Slayer's face. Urza, meanwhile, was oddly silent. She had been observing Naruto the entire time, thinking that he would fight like his father, but much to her expectation, he didn't. He had a fighting style of his own, a style that was unpredictable and on a whole new different level. With a speed and strength like that, Urza believed Naruto could end the fight anytime he wanted to. You're a tough bastard, aren't you? Natsu asked as he wiped the blood from his chin, keeping his eyes on Naruto the entire time as if he believed that the blonde would disappear and then randomly appear somewhere around him to deliver another devastating punch or kick. Naruto took a stance, with one hand behind his back and the other extending forward. Come little dragon, he said, provoking Natsu while making the come over gesture with his hand. Show me your strength. You ask for it. Natsu gritted his teeth as he flared his magic, engulfing his body in a column of fire, Modo Reianryu. Lightning Fire Dragon mode. Much to their surprise, lightning began to appear around him and soon surrounded his body. The earth around him was either destroyed or smoldered as his magic power skyrocketed. Wah! Wendy gasped in shock as the strong display of two elements. Is that? Lucy was also surprised. Taking a leap into the air, Natsu generated a large amount of fire in his right hand and lightning in his left hand, which he then brought together before throwing the massive combination of his magic at Naruto, creating a very large and sparkling explosion around him, wreaking havoc on the ground and throwing the mages back a bit. The entire area shook from the blast. Natsu panted as he looked at the dome of fire and lightning. It was nowhere near as strong as before, and it took a lot out of him, but at least he didn't pass out after using it. He just hoped that it was enough to get Naruto. It did, but at the same time, it didn't. It continued for a second before the explosion was blown away by a huge gust of the wind that was created by the man who had stood in the middle of it. Wind? Urza, being one of a few mages who was still standing, as the rest had already been knocked down to the ground, uttered in surprise as she used both arms to shield her face from the strong wind. I'm not done yet, Natsu roared as he got down on all four. Combining fire with lightning once again, the dual elements Dragon Slayer gathered them within his mouth and subsequently released them towards Naruto, generating an extremely large and destructive sparking blast that wreaked havoc wherever it passed. Naruto, however, didn't show the slightest of nervousness or even surprise. Calmly but quickly, he brought his hands back, before bringing them together in front of him, palms facing forward. Water formed around him and shot toward the blast of sparkling fire in the form of a gigantic circular torrent of water, even larger than Natsu's lightning fire dragon roar. A large amount of steam was created upon collision between the two powerful techniques, but Naruto's water vortex quickly overwhelmed Natsu's roar attack. The Dragon Slayer had his eyes widened in surprise when the wave of water, which was infused with the lightning of his attack, extinguished the blaze and continued to travel at his direction. Water magic too? Juvia Lockster, a water mage herself, couldn't stop herself from exclaiming in surprise. However, it was clear to her that Naruto's spell was at a whole different level. Natsu wisely dodged to the side, because he knew that water and lightning simply didn't go well with each other, and being hit by them at the same time wasn't going to be pretty. He charged at Naruto, creating a sphere of lightning and flame around his fist. Naruto swiped his hand up vertically, causing a huge chunk of rock to emerge from the ground, standing between him and Natsu. The mages of Fairy Tail could only gasp and look at Naruto in shock. Gare! Natsu roared and punched the rock as hard as he could, shattering it to pieces in the process. Naruto had expected this, so he quickly moved away before Natsu's fist could meet his face, using the steam to disappear from the Dragon Slayer's view. My turn now. Before Natsu could start searching for Naruto, he winced in pain when a sharp pain shot through his stomach, caused by Naruto, who thrust his elbow into his lower abdomen. This battle is over, Naruto said, and thrust his hand into Natsu's chest from below, sending him into the air. Naruto then disappeared, and when Natsu stopped in midair, he was suddenly hit by something moving extremely fast, making him cry out in pain while plunging down with extreme speed. However, before Natsu could even get 2 feet close to the ground, something suddenly hit him once again, sending him into the air. The force of the hit was so great, that it created a small, yet noticeable shockwave. The onslaught continued, and the mages of Fairy Tail looked on in shock and astonishment as Natsu looked like he was being tossed, punched and kicked around seemingly by the air itself. They knew full well what or who was attacked their Fire Dragon Slayer, but no matter how hard they tried, their eyes couldn't catch up to his speed. He was moving and attacking so fast that he was no longer seen. What's going on? Lucy asked, her body shaking. I can't see anything at all. The next second, while Natsu was floating in the air, Naruto appeared above him and delivered a straight punch into Natsu's stomach, smashing him down to the ground with so much force that it created a shockwave strong enough to knock some unprepared members of Fairy Tail back. Naruto returned to the ground shortly after, his feet dashed on the ground for a meter before he managed to stop himself. Turning around, he looked at Natsu, who had his vision overtaken by blackness as soon as he hit the ground before turning his attention to Makarov, who, along with the rest of Fairy Tail, could only look at him in awe. "I guess," he began, slowly while nodding his head, "this is your win. Just so you know, I don't like cat meats, to begin with, so don't worry, I won't cook the cats," Naruto said as he summoned the wallets, "but I think I will take this." He took the money from each of them before tossing them back to their owners. He counted a few thousands of jewels and gave them to Mira. "Keep it, it's for my meal and tips for you." Mira didn't know how to respond, so she simply accepted his money with a nod of her head. Naruto walked to Urza, who was standing with her teammates, and patted her on the shoulder. "Better start thinking about it now." He reminded them about his promise, before making his way back to the guild. "You defeat him." Sayla nodded her head, smiling triumphantly. "As expected from my master, not even Master End can hope to match you." A few decades ago Naruto had told Sayla about the true identity of End, the strongest ethereous demon. To say she was shocked to find out that the demon with the greatest power was the brother of her creator was an understatement. While she had never met him before, Sayla had an immense amount of respect for End for his power as the strongest. However, it still could not compare to the respect she had for her master, Naruto Uzumaki, the strongest being she had ever known in her life, whose powers could shake the entire world to its foundation. Although she had never seen him going all out on anyone or anything, not that he needed to, because they had never encountered anything that managed to push him that far yet, she knew full well that he had already surpassed godly level a very long time ago, and there was nothing in this world could hope to defeat him. "I don't think he's any stronger than you are right now," Naruto said thoughtfully. "He has the gut, and the will and the potential to get even more powerful than he is now, but sometimes, those are just not enough." "So, he cannot kill Zarif-sama right now? Not without his ethereous power, something I don't think he has any control over." Sayla nodded her head in understanding. End wasn't originally an ethereous, so he would have no control over his curse like the rest of them did. Plus, as the strongest, his desire to kill Zarif would be a whole lot stronger than the other, meaning that he would most likely lose himself the moment the demon seed was awakened. "Please continue on then, master." "Man, this suck." Natsu Dragneel crossed his arms over his chest and huffed in annoyance. He had bandages wrapped around his body from head to toe, but overall, he was fine. Wendy had already taken care of most of his injuries with her magic, but he still had some bruises there and a few broken ribs, which would take some time to heal properly. "Shut up," Lucy cried out while pointing her finger at Natsu. "It's your fault our money got taken away pointlessly like that. Hey, isn't Naruto the one who stole it? Then do not challenge him ever again." Then she grabbed her head with both hands and fell flat on the table. "How'd I supposed to pay my rent this month?" Ignoring Lucy, Natsu turned to Naruto and asked him, "Hey Naruto, how did you become so powerful?" "I trained a lot to get stronger." The blonde answered simply, not bothering to take his eyes away from the book he was reading. "You have any useful tips for me? Figure it out yourself." Giving Natsu a cold reply, Naruto then turned his head to the side when he saw Mira making her way to his table with a cup of tea in her hands. "Ah, here we go." He immediately brightened up and smiled, "Thank you." "You're welcome, Naruto-kun." The barmaid smiled and put the cup down. "So, it's Naruto-kun now?" Naruto teased. "You have a problem with that?" Mira asked sweetly as she stood up. "Call me anything you want." Naruto shrugged, giving no objection. Naruto, can I help you?" He didn't need to look to know it was Lucy. He had already memorized their voices and magical signatures in his head. "See, can you give me my money back?" She stuttered nervously. "That's all I have left." She put both of her hands together. "Please," she said hopefully. "No, I can't," Naruto answered curtly, shattering the celestial mage's hope into pieces. But Naruto then closed the book and put it down on the table before turning his head to look at Lucy. What? She was a little taken apart by the way Naruto was looking at her. Naruto began, "Do you constantly worry about your money? Because ever since I came to this place, I have heard a total of 52 times you whined about rent and—" "Wait, you counted?" Someone shouted in surprise, interrupting Naruto. "You have a problem with that?" The mage wisely looked away when he met Naruto's cold glare, while Lucy could only blush in embarrassment. Anyway, Naruto cleared his throat and then turned back to Lucy. Her rant was actually hard to notice because she kept doing that from time to time, even in the middle of the party. It's just that I can't why a girl like you has to worry so much about money? Take Mira here for an example. He gestured his hand to Mira, causing her to point at herself in surprise. She is pretty much in the same position as you are right now, and while I don't know if she is a tenant like you or not, what I care about is that she is giving out free food and free drinks. Naruto-kun, actually it's because. Ignoring Mira, he continued, there is plenty of ways for you raise your income so you don't have to worry about money. You can become a model or something like that with this kind of body. Have you ever tried to model before? Yeah, but, let's me guess, you were modeling and those guys came and ruined it. Naruto pointed his hand at Natsu and Gray, her teammates. No. I mean, yes, they really did something like that, but my dream is becoming a writer, not a model so. Lucy chuckled nervously while scratching the back of her head. A writer? Naruto raised an eyebrow in surprise before looking at Lucy in interest. Any book yet? He asked. Yes, but, you know. Naruto shook his head with a smile, signaling for her to stop. She didn't need to say it because he had already understood that her books couldn't sell very well. Here, in a flash, a book appeared in his hand and he gave it to Lucy. I will let you borrow this. What is this book? Lucy asked as she accepted the book from Naruto and read the title, The Tale of the Utterly Gusty Shinobi. She turned around and searched for the author's name, Jiraiya, the Toad Sage. She had read a lot of books, but she had never heard of an author with a weird pen name like him before. Muahaha, what a lame name. Natsu and his cat roared out in laughter. However, they immediately stopped and became as pale as ghosts when a sword appeared in their field of vision and impaled into the wooden wall only a millimeter away from their faces. That book is very important to me. Naruto said, it was not the bestseller ever, but to me, it has always been the best kind of book. Naruto said with a smile, as Lucy opened the book to take a glance. This is, she said in amazement. That right, I was named after the main character in that book. The immortal shinobi nodded his head, smiling fondly at the memories of the past. It was sold poorly, nobody bought it. He then turned back to eat his snack. I hope it will allow you to have more faith and belief in yourself. Lucy nodded and the guild fell into silence as they listened to Naruto's words. Keep your dream as a writer alive, and remember that all things are possible as long as you believe in it. Lucy then hugged it tightly to her chest before bowing, thank you. She stood up with a bright smile. Naruto then reached his hand into his pocket and summoned a few thousands of jewels from his dimensional pocket, which he then gave to her, much to everyone's surprise. Congratulations, you have just earned your money back. Lucy gasped in shock as she accepted the money. I give you this to have a copy of each and every single one of your books, given that you still have them. I will have them in a moment, please wait here. The blonde rapidly bowed her head before running out of the guilds as fast as she could, making her way to home to grab the books Naruto bought, with her money. The smile on her face couldn't get any bigger and brighter. As the door was closed, the guild quickly went back to whatever they were doing, with Naruto's words in their mind. The shinobi, meanwhile, had gone back to drink his tea, but when he realized Mira was looking at him the entire time, he couldn't help but ask. Why are you looking at me like that? You're so nice, and pretty sweet too. Mira stated softly before bringing out another cup of tea, which she replaced with Naruto's empty cup. Here you go. This is on me this time. Well, thank you. Naruto smiled and picked it up, the benefit of being a good person. Still can't get used to it. He muttered before taking a small sip. It was very delicious as everything Mira had been making for him. It didn't take long for another member of Team Natsu to arrive at his table. This time, it was a petite girl with fair skin, with long, dark blue hair that reached down to her waist, with two bangs framing her face and reaching down to her chest alongside her brown eyes. She wore a suit-like top, dress shirt and a small skirt with a large sash holding the top and skirt together. She finished her outfit with dark stockings and black shoes. It was Wendy Marvel, the Sky Dragon Slayer. Can I help you? It was clear that she came to try her luck, but what a little girl like her could offer him in return for her money. Naruto-san, see can you? To tell the truth, Wendy was a little terrified at the way Naruto was looking at her. His eyes only made his worse, because they were ice cold and void of emotion when he wasn't smiling. You have problems with self-confidence? Naruto asked before looking away. Sorry little girl, you can't earn your money back like this. But, That money is all I and Carla have. Wendy tried to argue, you can't. She widened her eyes when she saw Naruto's hand right in front of her face. Faster than he could react, he flicked her forehead so hard that she was knocked down to her butt while holding her forehead in pain. Don't bother. I'm actually more stubborn than the brat over there, so you can't argue with me over something like this. He summoned Wendy's money and waved it around. Stop being such an ass. Carla, Wendy's exceed, appeared at her side and pointed her paw at Naruto while saying sternly, why are you so mean to her? I said I didn't like cat meat, it didn't say I could not eat it. The white exceed was taken apart by his words. So, would you like to be cooked with an apple in your mouth? Some laughed, thinking it as a joke, while many others didn't find it that humorous. Urza Scarlet was one of them. She was back to eating her favorite dish again, but her entire attention wasn't focusing on it. Instead, she had her mind focused on Naruto and his magic during his fight against Natsu. In a way, how Naruto wielded his magic was very similar to how she switched between armors to use different types of magic. He could use many elemental magic, she too, through her armors could use many elemental spells. He was fast, and while she doubted she could be just as fast, she could increase her speed with some of her armors. The same could be said for physical strength and defense. Still, she had the feeling that those spells weren't the full extension of his power, and he still had many tricks up his sleeves. There was something she wanted to confirm. Suddenly, Urza stood up from her table and walked to Naruto's table. Then, before he could say anything, she summoned a silver sword into existence, and with quick reflexes, she stabbed it down his table, breaking it in the process. Her action surprised everyone, but not Naruto, who quickly caught his bowl of cookies and cup of tea without spilling a drop. Is that necessary? Naruto asked, looking at her. The Queen of Fairies' expression turned serious as she steeled her brown eyes on him. Naruto, announced Urza, I challenge you to a one-on-one battle. Whoa, Mikao remarked. Urza never challenges anyone, it's usually the other way around. I can't believe it. Lucy, who had returned to the guild only a second before Urza had declared her challenge, gaped in surprise. Did Urza really just challenge Naruto? Naruto didn't reply right away. Instead, he gave the tea and cookie to Mira before asking, why should I fight you? As I said, you had nothing to. This is not about Minato-sensei. Urza shook her head, I want to fight you because I want our money back. She declared strongly. Is that so? Naruto raised an eyebrow. Yes, if I win, you have to return my money and Wendy's money back to us. Hey, what about me? Gray cried out. And Gray too. Urza quickly added, I want them back. And what if I win? We will pay for your meals for the rest of the month. She answered without thinking, causing Naruto to smirk. Lucy nearly dropped her book. Wendy and Gray gasped and looked like they wanted to argue, but a quick glare from her was enough to shut them up. How about it? Will you accept? Or are you scared that you will get your ass kicked by your father's student? Alright Urza, Naruto, but let me warn you, though. I eat a lot. Those 4 words caused the members of Team Natsu shivered fearfully. For the second time of the day, Fairy Tail was treated with entertainment. But they all understood that the upcoming battle was going to be much more exciting. From across the crowd, Kana was once again gathering bets from other members of the guild, which had split into 2 sides. One side bet their money on Urza, while the other bet on Naruto. Natsu and Gray, along with Lucy and Wendy, were among the group that bet on Urza, because first, they didn't want to lose any more of their money, and second, they doubted he could win against her. After all, she was one of the girls that had tormented them and haunted their nightmares ever since they were kids. The other being Mira, but she had changed and become a sweet angel. Master Makarov and Happy were part of the small group that betted on Naruto. Mira had her money on Naruto too, but only for a few hundred jewels. It was part of the money Naruto had given her, so she wasn't too worried about losing it. I don't know if this is such a good idea, Lucy said nervously as she looked at Urza and Naruto, who stood to face each other in the middle of the battlefield. Alright, Urza, Naruto said as he cracked his neck around, same rule. You land a blow or leave a scratch on me, you win. Still very confident, aren't you? Urza asked as she pointed her sword at him. Fine then, so be it. All bets are in, Kana shouted. Once Master Makarov heard Kana's announcement, he took a few steps in front of the crowd and raised his hand, deciding to be the one who announced the match this time. Begin. In a flash, Urza re-equipped her armor and charged at Naruto, re-equipping her armors using her magic. In a flash, the armor Urza was now wearing featured very few armored parts, with the plate taking the form of a very revealing, armored cheetah-patterned top, with some bare armor protruding from the upper part of it, in correspondence to her S, and some fur lining the lower edges. There was no waistguard, with the armor instead sporting a pair of revealing black shorts, with a belt holding a cloth hanging over Urza's left leg attached to them. The outfit had a large collar around Urza's neck and a tail hanging from the back of her shorts, both made of bushy fur, plus a pair of large cheetah's ears adorning both sides of Urza's head. Iza summoned the spear that came with her armor and tried to stab him with it at high speed, but Naruto was even faster than that. He quickly moved his body out of the way, then grabbed her wrist to pull her toward him then and kneed Urza hard in her gut, making the swordswoman cough in pain before she got knocked down to the ground by an elbow to the back. Urza gritted her teeth and quickly summoned swords that she used with her feet, wielding their hilts between her hallux and second toes. She put her hands on the ground and spun her body with her legs in the air, trying to slash him with the newly summoned sword while hoping that it would catch him off guard. It didn't, and she expected as much. He summoned a sword and parried the strike from the sword in the left foot with ease, before continuing with the right one. Urza twisted her body around, slashing her swords left and right, but he dodged and blocked them just as fast as she was delivering the blows. She pushed herself up and started adding the knives in her hands to the onslaught. An opening. Urza widened her eyes when she saw Naruto dropping his left shoulder. Quickly taking her opportunity, she rolled to that direction and slashed her sword down. Wrong, Naruto suddenly said, as if he could read her mind, it's a decoy. He said and summoned the second sword in his hand. This one, however, was a broadsword and it was much, much larger than any sword she had in her arsenal. It had two cutouts, a circle close to the top, a semicircular one nearer to the handle, and extremely long handle. Sparks flew between them when Naruto brought the sword up as if it was weightless and blocked Urza's knives and pushed her back. Wielding it with only one hand, Naruto took a leap toward her and slashed it down. Urza instantly changed her armor to purgatory armor and brought a spiked mace up to block Naruto's much larger weapon. However, the strike came much, much stronger than she thought. It was so powerful that her mace was knocked away from her body, numbing her hands. Naruto continued to wield the blade with mastery and strength beyond anything she had ever seen. How did he wield a sword like that with just one hand, and with that kind of speed without tiring himself out, was beyond her. However, it was the least of her worry, as she feared that just a slightest of contact would leave her with a nasty injury, or worse, amputated, so she re-equipped her armor back to flight armor and dodged, as fast as she could. You have good reflex, Naruto commented as he brought the sword down, and instantly changed hand to slash it up. Urza was able to dodge it, but a few strands of her hair weren't that fortunate. My father trained you well, didn't he? Of course. Urza gritted her teeth as she was forced to retreat. That's why I cannot lose against you. She raised her hand and summoned multi-swords in the air. What are you going to do with them? Naruto taunted when Urza brought them down at him from every direction, but the blonde easily deflected them by spinning his sword around and performing various strikes. It's no use. Wrong, Urza cried as she dashed toward him and started slashing him relentlessly from every direction with two long swords. It's a decoy. She cried, and with a devastating blow, she knocked his sword away from his hand. As her eyes shone happily while following the movement of his sword in the air, she didn't saw the smile appearing on Naruto's face as he looked at her. It didn't last long, and immediately disappear when she returned her attention to him. She slashed her swords horizontally, but she had learnt that an attack like that wasn't going to do much against him. So she switched strategy. She decided to fight him with something else. At the same time, she understood that she had to finish the fight as fast as she could. Her body was engulfed in light, and she re-equipped her armor once again. Before her new set of armor could fully appear on her body, Urza had already summoned her weapons and charged at Naruto. Alright, Natsu and Happy cheered when they saw the armors Urza was wearing. What is that armor? Lucy could only ask in surprise. Looking around, she could see that the others sharing the same expression. It appeared that only Natsu and Happy knew about this. Naruto didn't take a second thought. He summoned his own weapon and attacked Urza when she passed him in a blur. The red-haired woman stopped a few feet behind Naruto, and a moment of silence passed over the two before Urza broke it. "I knew it," Urza said with a small smirk, "you really are a shinobi." The armor she was wearing was what the people of the ancient eras would call ninja attire, which consisted of a black, sleeveless kimono-styled top, black arm warmers with scale-like metal arm guards and leggings with shinamur, and black tabi with wuragi. She finished her outfit with a black scarf, which wrapped around her neck and extended down to her thighs. And in her hand was a kunai, one of the ninja's signature weapons, identical to the one Naruto was holding in his hand. "I didn't know my old man would go this far." He turned around to look at her clothes before smiling. He closed his eyes, smiling softly when he raised his hand and wiped the blood which leaked down from the small cut on his cheek. He could make it heal instantly, but he didn't. "Alright. I guess this make you the winner." The moment Natsu asked if he was a ninja, he immediately understood it was Urza, and the armors she was wearing gave him that impression. "You let her hit you and missed her on purpose, didn't you, master?" Sayla asked, and Naruto could only nod his head in response. "You're just too soft sometimes." "Well, you know that I can be as hard as a rock too." Naruto joked, but the Aetherius didn't find it funny. "When it comes to the people I care about, I just can't help it, you know," he stated softly, caressing Sayla's cheek with his thumb. His expression immediately brightened up when he stood up from his seat and removed his shirt. "Come on. Let's not waste any more time." He quickly picked her up and carried her into the bedroom with him. "I just hope you know what you are doing, master." That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.